Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Nathan, otherwise known as Old Man Builds. We have Jarvis here today, otherwise known as Mr. Lanius. Guys, what's going on?
Hello, everybody. So, Nathan had offered an open mic tonight, and it seems like nobody stepped up. So, I'm just gonna try to wing something and see if we can just fly on the whim and come up with something. And uh, what was it, Dizzy Dog? Was that?
What was that all about? I don't understand.
That's kind of my term for whenever. Okay, I think there's a separation between physicists and engineers. And the biggest difference is when it comes to energy and power. Okay, so the physicists are focused on the energy. So they're really a dog chasing their own tail with energy because it can't be created or destroyed. It's a conservative quantity, like the speed of light is conserved, right? The wavelength and frequency will always be a constant. The energy will always be a constant and a system too. And another example is the charge. Okay, Mike Faraday gave a good example of this just a couple of videos back, where you can actually like manipulate the capacity and the voltage because the charge stays constant. And you can actually get a huge voltage by separating those two plates because the charge stays constant. So energy is a constant, basically. But power is not conserved like that. Power is the rate of change. So like a crossbow, it takes more time for you to pull it back to snap it, right? So power is the relationship between the energy of putting it in and the energy that's coming out. And that's not a conserved quantity. So the dizzy dog is those physicists that chase the energy. And the engineer has to realize that it's the power that matters and not the energy. Power is what I was trying to say with the boost bell is a different quantity. It's not conserved. That's the big difference.
Is that anything like a duty cycle in the system where you pull it back and then release it? You know what I mean? At a certain point?
It's exactly, well, if I can try to share something, I tried to whip something together. I mean, I heard that you didn't have anybody on, so I try to throw a little bit together, but let me see if I can find it real quick.
Yeah, we're good at all times, Ben. Just talking is good.
I was discussing this with Joe too, but basically, I can explain it without having to pull it up. The mathematics for a mousetrap, the torsion of that spring is exactly the same as the energy stored in an inductor, okay? And they look the same. So the energy stored is half with a spring. It's half times the spring constant times the angle that you pull it, okay, with a mousetrap. The same thing with any inductor that's wrapped around. The energy stored is, in this case, half the inductance times the square of the current. So the current is analogous to the square of the angle that you pull the spring back. But whenever you set a mousetrap, it'd be stupid to try to set it at the same rate that it snaps. If you did that, then you would get the same power out the end. But you slowly bring a mousetrap back and let it snap on its own. You're storing the energy and then rapidly opening the circuit, but it takes an opening of the circuit because everybody tries to close the circuit. So you have to think of a mousetrap where you're setting it and then allowing it to open. And that opening is where you get the power out because it's a negative resistance. It literally acts like a power source. It acts like a battery at that point. When you pull an inductor, like you're storing the magnetic field and you open the circuit, it acts like a battery. And the release of that power is based off the resistance of the path that it's releasing through. So it's counterintuitive. With the capacitors, it's the opposite. Like a capacitor will fire slow through a resistance. But an inductor, if you open the circuit, it fires quick through a resistance. The higher the resistance of that opening, the quicker the magnetic field collapses. So that's the difference between a capacitive discharge and an inductive discharge. And there is an inductive discharge. What's up, Joe? Joe
Hey,
Fuchsia's.
speak of the devil, and then he might just show up. Huh?
I love it, dude. I was hoping you'd be on because I think you are wrapping your mind around this like me and Nathan, starting to realize that it's not a high frequency on the beginning. It's a slow build up like a mousetrap. That's really the first step you want to do. You like a low frequency is more penetrating. The Navy uses low frequency when it comes to communication through oceans and stuff because it's more penetrating. You can get more distance off of a low frequency than a high frequency. But it's like a bell where it comes to the frequency of the clapper is slower than the resonance of the bell itself. That clapper is at a lower frequency, the resonance of the bell. So there's two different frequencies. There's a low frequency of the clapper, and then there's the resonant frequency of the bell, which is controlled by its shape and material and all that stuff.
So question then. In a Tesla coil, we ring it really fast with the high frequency, right? But if we were bringing that
everybody
down,
thinks.
Yeah, so if we bring that down to hertz, then it would ring longer at that frequency, right?
Yeah, you can literally open the circuit and bell it into another one and have whatever frequency you want is what I'm trying to get at. It's exactly like a bell. Like it's not like what they're doing now is trying to ring the clapper at the same rate as the RLC circuit, which is a tank, and I call it a bell. So it's inefficient. You know, it's just you're trying to rapidly vibrate it like a guitar player trying to tremolo pick instead of just strumming. The strumming is much more efficient.
And it lasts longer, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it just rings out. I mean, you hit it once. You know, you're not going to try to drum on a bell at the same frequency. That's stupid. It's inefficient, and that's what people are doing. They're thinking that it's the frequency, and they're trying to drum the bell at the same frequency when all they got to do is hit it and let it vibrate.
Yeah, right. Let it ring.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you know, the analogy you were given before too about the mousetrap. I mean, I was kind of thinking about it like a dam, because you know, a dam fills. It doesn't take much to keep the water back in, but once it reaches the point where it's over that dam, all that force is going to come forward. You know, and it took a lot less force to keep that back than the force that's going to be returned over the top.
Oh, yeah.
That's why Tesla was so obsessed with Niagara. You know what I mean? He wanted to use exactly what you're saying. It's a buildup of potential and a rapid release of that potential. And let nature, like the sun evaporates the water, let it deposit into a dam structure, and then you can control the release because you have as much potential as you want. But it's the rate that you release that gives you the more power. That's absolutely right. Yeah, it's a rate difference. Like energy is always going to be the same in and out, always. Period. And we're not talking about energy when it comes to over unity. We're talking about power. You know, the coefficient of performance is what you study when you look at over unity. You're not looking at the energy. You're looking at the coefficient of performance. And there's nothing in physics that says you can't have more power out than in. You know.
So
the dog chasing.
So what you're saying is they're looking for total joules of energy, when they should be looking at the short impact of energy.
They're the dog chasing their tail on energy, because we can all agree like energy is not created or destroyed. It can be transformed, but it's the rate that the energy is utilized that gives you power, and power is not a conserved quantity. You know what I mean? That's what Tesla was getting at.
Right. Well, you see that with capacitors all the time, right? If you have a rapid capacitor discharge, the power of that reaction is much different than drawing that same amount of energy out of a cell, for instance, over the course of days to run like a little fan, let's say. Same amount of energy, different.
So a slow input will naturally give you a higher power input or output because the rate is different. Just, you know, just like a mousetrap or a crossbow or a bow and arrow. You know, so time is really the currency of power. Okay, when it comes to power, time it's actually better to be patient in the beginning and let it go through a motor and build a magnetic field and then rapidly open that, because you'll get more power out if you do that. But you have to be patient to run it through the motor first.
You see, I failed in running my motor for a long time because I didn't put a duty cycle onto it. So it had no place to stop and refill the capacitor and then discharge again. And each one is like a merry-go-round. You just spin it just a little bit each time, and it'll eventually get there. And I was looking at one of the other inventors today for Troy Reed, and his big device. He has big wheels on it, right? And once he gets the magnets going against the rods that come up, it's like pistons on each one of them. He's got 4 of them. And what it does is it starts spinning this flywheel, big one, right? And that centrifugal force keeps going. And all he's doing is pushing it on a merry-go-round every once in a while in order to get it going. So it's such less power going in. It's an interesting...
When you realize it's not the frequency, you know, if you watch that boost bell video, it's not the frequency that matters. And even a lower frequency is more just by a relaxation oscillator, basically, will give you more power out just because it's the rate of the energy over time. And think of it as a power. Don't think of the energy. That's the dog chasing its own tail, and that's the dizzy dog of this topic. And the physicist will try to debunk it on the energy level. The engineer will say, look, energy, we agree that it's not created or destroyed, but the rate of that energy is what gives you the power. That's why a refrigerator has a higher coefficient of performance than the power you put in, because of the power difference, not the energy difference. It's always going to be what you put in with energy is what you get out. But it's
okay. So let me be the wild one to say it, Jarvis. So what happens when you're creating capacitance inside of a time dilation field?
Well, it'll depend. Like then it'll dilate the time of that charge.
Right. So then it would have an effect on its discharge outside of the time dilation field, right?
Well, you
does
can
that
easily
speed up its ability to saturate in capacitance and discharge? Does it allow for
well, you're dilating the time by building the magnetic field in the first stage, basically.
Right. So what happens if you're able to hold the capacitance in a time dilation field is where I'm going. You see how the relativity of the time makes a difference then, right?
Yeah. But okay, so as a static charged an electric or capacitor is what you're saying. Let's just take a charged capacitor and then manipulate the time is what you're saying, right? Or are you saying charge it during a time dilation?
Well, no, it's a capacitance holding charge, but there's a time dilation. So on the other side of that field, it's discharging at a different rate than it would be at a standard operation.
Yep, so, that's where I'm going.
Yeah, the way you do that is through inductance is what I'm getting at. Because the time constant can either be dependent on the resistance through the capacitor or the inductance. So you're building up a large magnetic field like a mousetrap. You're pulling it back and you're quickly opening that. You have to open the circuit, and that's why quenching a spark gap is important, okay? Because you have to open it in order for that mousetrap to slam down. And then when it slams down, it's just converted into potential. And the capacitor, the voltage is going to skyrocket.
So I guess what I think Joe's getting at is we normally only have high voltages going through something like this, and it's one to the next, and that's how like a DC flyback setup. But we're looking at high voltage and high current. So we're discharging really fast, so we should get a pretty good current out of it along with the voltage.
Right.
But the time dilation would slow it on the discharge, but speed it up at the next level and then speed it up again. So then we would get a high rate of change, right? But then the
Well,
current would still be high, so you'd have a
It
high
would right. It would be
frequency, high charge.
a high pulse is what it would be on its discharge.
the counterintuitive thing about the time difference between a capacitor charge or discharge and an inductive charge or discharge is that the inductor is inversely proportional to the resistance. Okay, so if a circuit is open and it's sent through a path of high resistance, that magnetic field collapses faster than it would on just a short circuit through itself.
Right.
Okay. So with a capacitor, it's opposite. If it fires through a resistance, it takes more time for the current to go through and back through the capacitor. If it short circuits, it's very quick. It's the
Right.
opposite.
Slamming a truck into a wall, you get all that potential of that energy flying through the spark gap.
Yeah, it's just it's the inverse of each other. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you short circuit a magnetic field collapse, you actually collapse the field slower than sending it through a high resistance path. When you send it through a high resistance path, it collapses faster.
Well, right. That makes sense because of the density. You're dealing with a diffuse field on the outside as opposed to a condensed field in a spark gap.
Right. Yes.
Right.
So
Makes sense.
Yeah. So that's important to understand when it comes to the boost bell, to send it through an inductance and then open it, but send it through a capacitor because that's basically an open circuit until the capacitor fully charges, and you can go whatever voltage you want on that once you open it, and it goes through that because it's basically a closed circuit that can build the voltage to whatever you want. I can show you mathematically, but you can get it's not the voltage in the beginning. Off a 12-volt battery, you can get thousands of volts just by sending it through a motor, opening that circuit, and charging a capacitor.
Yeah, pretty much. We got a field for everything. Yeah, sort of physicists, like mainstream ones.
They have an electron for everything.
Yeah.
I was watching that today, trying to figure out how they were dealing with the electron and the ether. And it was the whole reason that they were just looking at a magnet is how they discovered it. And they never thought to look past that. So the whole system is built on how a magnetic field works on one side of it. They never understood the opposite side of the field. So they couldn't accurately depict anything. So when they tried to describe the ether, they always described it as a magnetic field and not as anything else. It always had to be that. And I think it was a huge flaw.
Big flaw. I agree.
I can show you something real quick if you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me try. I'm trying to get used to this. I'm just going to share the entire screen, I think. I don't want the audio to interfere. Should I
Just
share
mute
audio?
it. Just mute it.
All right. I'm going to just go ahead and share the entire screen. It's not letting me. Hold on one second. All right. There we go. And this was, can you see it?
Okay, we got 2 jars. Yeah. We got lights. What's going on here?
So that's a 10-watt bulb. That's kind of a mixture of the relay using the Bedini method and the Tesla method I'm talking about, where you pull it back like a torsion spring on a mousetrap. I actually called it the mousetrap whenever I made it, just to study this. But I'm actually getting 4 times more energy out when you do the calculation of a 10-watt bulb there. I'm using a boost converter. I'm going through a battery and boosting it up to 35 volts instead of 12 volts or 12.6 of a full charge. And you can see it's 2.3 watts, less than 2.5 watts going in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm boost converting the 12 volts to 35. the voltage drops across the relay, but it's going through that inductor there. It's called a DC reactor, just as the mousetrap analogy. And whenever it opens, that's what charges the capacitor and can give me 4 times more power out because of the difference is what I'm saying there. But I go to take the temperatures and everything to show that it's not like overloading with temperature. We don't have to watch all that, but the point I'm trying to get across is it's a new mousetrap, basically. You know, you got to have patience in the beginning and then open the circuit. It's not about closing it, it's about opening it. And I plan to put that relay in the jar with the vacuum.
Did you say it's a charge pump then?
Yeah, it's basically it's almost like a ram pump, you know, where you get the ram effect. For you can send from a pond, you can send it uphill.
Mhm.
That's kind of what this is. It's like a ram pump when it comes to, you know, fluid dynamics. I'm basically doing a ram pump here, but I like to think of it as a mousetrap because the mathematics are exactly analogous.
Very nice.
But so let me see.
Looks like you solved all the problems right there. All we got to do is jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the beginning, guys. That's not even it. But it's a good start. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's just to give you an analogy, you know, to think of a slow input instead of a fast input, because the output can be whatever frequency you want. And it's actually better to build a field and collapse it as rapid as you want to get the charge on the capacitor and then fire it again. Like, let me show you. Am I still sharing? No.
No, go ahead and put it up. I'll put it up again.
So this is the boost bell. I don't know if it's sharing.
It's not sharing.
Let me see. Sorry, I gotta get used to this. Right here, is it sharing?
No. Yeah, we see us. We did.
The simulation?
No.
No? It's not sharing?
No.
Is it running?
No, we just see us. Or there you go.
Yep.
Change
It's
it.
just the StreamYard feed is all it is.
Yeah.
Can you see? You don't see this?
No, you have to click on it because you're sharing your screen. So whatever you see on your screen is what we're seeing.
Yeah, it's a simulation, but it's not sharing it.
No.
Okay.
That's all right.
Well, I'll do something different then. Hold on one second. So, I wish I could show the simulation. And simulations aren't accurate, but it gives me an idea of how I need to control the inductance and resistance on the first stage. You know, so, you know, Don Smith did this too. He would simulate it. And you want a simulator that's that can handle you know, basically anti-symmetric type of equations, and this can't do that, but I take that into account. But the simulations literally show, wish I could show it, that it doesn't violate physics, and it's a clear output of power that's 100 times more than the energy or power that I put in, you know, just off what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's no doubt of what you're saying. I completely agree, and I think Joe does as well, on how you're building it and how it's coming out. There's no question there.
Yeah, for sure.
I wish I could show it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I
We
mean,
get the
Toy
idea.
Maker was just throwing out there about the fields, basically saying that there's a magnetic field, a dielectric field, and the two of them in combination, is the
Right.
electric field. And I happen to agree with that. But I mean, it still has its own manifest of attributes within the combination of those fields and the ratios. And those create their own kind of subfields within too, through those manifestations. The presence of different, like static and plasma and things of those natures, and
That's why
and how they're
I
compressed.
can't get. I can't
So
wait to
that's
get
why
into
there's so
the.
many fields. I kind of put that out there because you're not wrong. You're absolutely right. But it's the combination of those that lie all those other fields in the
That's
electric field.
why. That's why I'm trying to break open the new avenue of electrics, because the material science will be what you're saying, to where it's more field oriented. Instead of even having any motion, it could be solid state. And people are like, with a magnet, if you were the first person to say, hey, here's a magnet, people would be like, who cares about a magnet? What do you do with it? That's the same thing that's going on with electrics right now. But electrics are literally the next stage we have to take. It's knowing how to use those, that it's not disclosed yet, that will be. But just think of how magnets have changed the world, and electrics are even more powerful. Magnets are just the tip of the iceberg, because the periodic table is all electric. It's 3 or 4 at room temperature that are magnetic, ferromagnetic. Out of all the periodic table, you only have cobalt, iron, nickel, practically at room temperature, that are ferromagnetic.
Mhm.
Even those, though, are electric because the charge is intrinsic, and the magnetic field is more of an effect of it traveling through the ether that gives it that magnetic field. So the charge is really the root when it comes to that, and we haven't even begun to discuss how it can change technology, just like a magnet. That's all I got to say. I don't want to disclose too much, but I can see where it goes. So the material science is very important, because then you don't have to come up with all these contraptions and timing and all that stuff. You can literally produce a vortex in the ether and let it sit there, almost like it would be similar to Sparky Sweet. Sparky Sweet did something similar, where he would have, a barium ferrite system, but barium ferrite's actually a good dielectric. And Bedini would say that he was charging it like an electric. So he's basically encasing those coils within a field of higher density of an electric and magnetic field in the first place. So he's setting the field density before he even runs. That's what gives him higher power, because once you exceed the field density of the earth within a small component like he had, you can just tickle it, like Gerald says, and then you'll get higher power out, because it's a higher density of the electromagnetic atmosphere within that enclosed space. So that's why electrics are important, and understanding it on the material science is going to be key, I think.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, the attributes of the material themselves, how they combine and interact with one another, and what you're running through it, it all
And
matters at the end of the day. And that's how you get the effect. You kind of need a little bit of everything, and sort of force everything into a state that it doesn't want to be in. It's that uncomfortable state that it's in, that ultimately creates the types of effects that we're looking for.
right. So the transverse wants to be magnetic perpendicular to the electric, you know what I mean? But what if you use materials to force those parallel? You know what I mean? You're using the materials. This is where I'm getting at. You can just have a vortex in the ether just by forcing those to be parallel.
Okay.
You can do that with materials.
And it sounds like the Kashmir effect.
No, at that point it's longitudinal because
It's longitudinal, but then it's got directional propagation at that point because of the cavity.
well, I'm just saying, like, you take a magnet and you take an electret, okay? And like with the Earth, it's kind of like the Earth that has a north and south like this on the magnetic field, right? And then say it's got like an east and west,
Mhm.
north and south, east and west, and say the electric field is the east and west component of that.
Mhm.
Okay, so what happens if you just force it using an electric material like this? What
Right.
happens to the
Well, right, and that's like that state of discomfort that I was describing before. When you're forcing something to be something that it's not,
yeah,
that's when you get the that was the
and you can
most
easily
simple, common worded way to put it. But yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. Right.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. I've just been able to think of it for so long. Like uh I I've been trying to figure out what I want to try to patent to get going. And because I have a lot of things that I want to patent. And I thought electrodes was a good introduction because a lot of people don't even know what those are. And when we started discussing them, the plasma channel came out with the electret and stuff. But it's because when you look forward, you can see how, like a magnet, you don't understand what it does now, but how it can change the world literally. So I wanted to start with that, but there's other things that I really want to get into, but the electorate is a great starting point for all of us. I want everybody to be involved. Like, I don't want to say it, but I was actually debating about ripping the patent online like Tesla because I wanted to be the second person in history to just have a patent that could be revolutionary and rip it. Because I don't want the money, I want the information to be out. But I have a partner, Sean is my partner. I have people that believe in me, so I have to hold the torch. I can't, for them, if it were just me, I would rip it. You know what I mean? I'm not worried about money. I want people to understand these things because then that's the only way to proliferate the technology is for people to get the basic grasp of what's going on.
I mean, all this stuff is like it's understandable your position because at the end of the day, whenever you have somebody who, like you said, believes in you, they have some kind of vested interest in the patent too, and you know, there's like that fine line out there, and it's like I always say on the subject when it comes to patents and stuff like that. You know, uh, this stuff you could let the cat out of the bag, but it's never and people will know about it, right? But it's never going to be big and widely adopted until somebody monetizes it. Period. End of story. There's no other way because people aren't going out reading and extrapolating the information out of the patents, creating this stuff to see it for themselves and then make functional systems. Like nobody's doing that, right?
I
So
think it's more
at the end of the day,
the
like
utility. The utility, I think, is more important. Just
yeah,
to, I mean, I'm not, if it's something that can be utilized, I think that's what gives it profit. Like I said, like money, really, honest to God, I'd be so happy in the woods, just with a black light at night, looking for gemstones. You can locate sapphires. I'm a prospector. I just love nature, and I think God has already given me everything that I need. And
oh
I'm
yeah,
not
nature
in it
will
for
always, when you
profit.
have your eyes open and you're in tune to the things going on around you, the world around you will tell you everything that you need to know. And there's
Sean's
nothing that we
literally
talk about that you couldn't
using
understand through like simple physics and mechanics. That's it.
Sean's literally using sand as the aggregate. Sand is
Hmm.
everywhere. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's really, since people can do it themselves, it's really not profitable for me, because anybody can go to a beach, shake some sand up, charge it triboelectrically, and have a grill igniter is what I was going to get at.
Hmm.
It's funny that you had mentioned it, but the grill igniter within a vacuum chamber is where I was going to sell the kit to make electrets, because a grill igniter is 50,000 volts.
Yeah.
You don't even need a Wimshurst or any of these things. You just hit a grill igniter that's in a vacuum of the electret, and you put a high voltage diode on there to keep it either positive or negative. And that's how easy it is to make a kit to make electrets, you know, like magnets. I'm sorry if the mic's too loud. I'll try to adjust the level. Am I too loud?
No.
You're fine.
But yeah, so like I said, you can't make profit off dirt. Dirt is ceramic, it's magnetic, iron oxide, sand. Dirt and sand is really
I
the
was going to
basic
say,
thing.
people actually make money off of dirt all the time.
That's what this is. It's literally a patent that like takes dirt and sand as an aggregate, and whatever binder you know, wax is a great binder because it's tried and true for electrets, you know. And I'm trying to do the historical thing of how electrets got going because people don't even get it.
Well, that goes right back into that conversation we were having the other day about do it like they did it, so you know it works, so you understand exactly the trials, the tribulations with it, the inner workings of it, and you get the result that they got. And then at that point, you could then interject everything else that you know and that has advanced since then into you know, making it newer, better, and just, you know, more in line with what you're looking to get out of it. And so that's a great philosophy to have. And I mean, frankly, beeswax has excellent properties into itself.
I love it. I
You
love
know,
beeswax. I've been harping on bees.
It
for
really
a while.
does. So yeah,
I think, you know, they have some electrical intuition of where their hives are, and you know, they're wondering why they're dying off and everything with all the electromagnetic radiation that we send through the airwaves. You know, like we say global warming is due to carbon dioxide, but we're forgetting that we're microwaving. We're literally microwaving the atmosphere when it comes to radar and everything. All these electromagnetic signals have to confuse the bees because whenever they pick up pollen, they don't go onto the flower. They gravitate the pollen to their belly. They statically attract pollen to their belly is how they gather it. You know what I mean? Their hives are the honeycombs are meant for them to have like a beacon. You know, Grebennikov is where this comes with cavernous structure effects and everything. You know, they're electric beings, and everybody's wondering why they're dying off is because we have so much shit, so much radiation. It's confusing them. You know,
So
rails coming up on, you know.
I have to ask you, they used beeswax when they did the generators and stuff. So did they hold an electric charge in them?
Yes.
At all times?
I think one of Tesla's biggest breakthroughs on his last patent, where it shows his power magnifying transmitter for radiant energy, the power source is a capacitor. If you look, all of his other patents, and he put that, I think, as a hint, all of his other patents show the sign of a generator. The power source of his power magnification for the last, and the art of transmitting the power was a capacitor, an electret. So an electret, when it comes to that, is like a permanently charged capacitor. When I showed you the video, the diatribe, you can literally take a coaxed cable, melt it in an oven, and charge it, and it'll spark. You're getting free sparks, and it's a capacitor that's keep charging itself. When you do that, you're literally producing a power source, but it's a slow power source. But we know now that it doesn't take a quick power source, right? It's literally sitting there and spark.
I mean, that's a great point, and I didn't know that was a thing. But
well, hold on.
Diatribe.
I got another question because it has to do with the generators. So if you already have an electric charge placed on them at all times, all you have to do is set that thing to produce amps, right? And then when it comes out, it should be both.
Yeah, I mean the amps are your magnetics, basically, and I mean you can literally use magnet like, I won't go there. That's kind of, I think, like Sparky Sweep was kind of doing that when it comes to static, electric, and magnetic fields. As long as you have an environment, like you always say, that field it hits the walls, and the environment is part of that whole system.
Mhm.
Now collapse that whole environment down and either orient the magnetic field and electric field like this or force it like this. And if you do that, you get a natural vortex just because the electric field is parallel to the magnetic field. They don't want to
Right.
be
That
like
makes sense. And right. That absolutely makes sense.
that's Sparky Sweet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get at a very specific point when I'm asking this. I'm trying to ask is if I put the electric right on the generator, okay, in the beeswax, on the wires, I would have a high voltage charge immediately before I spun this thing up at all. If I set it to just be a amperage motor or an amperage generator, right? I would get a mix of voltage and amps that I can throw into something to change the duty cycle, but I would have a good amount of both in the end. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying, or am I wrong?
the amperage is basically the shutting of a capacitor is where you get your highest amperage. So they're related, but in conventional electronics they're 90 degrees because you're building the potential of a capacitor and then firing that capacitor, and as soon as you fire that capacitor is where you get your high amperage. And that high amperage is the magnetic field that builds. So there's
Yeah,
ways.
that makes sense, right? Okay, I get that. That's
You get
cool.
it? Okay, so
Hmm.
there's ways to actually capture that without even influencing the magnetic field that spreads out. But
Right.
I
The
have to get
amperage
to
on the
that later.
close because the resistance goes up like hitting a wall.
Right. So it's converting that huge potential of the capacitor into straight up kinetic energy. That is what you're doing when you fire a highly charged capacitor. You're converting that potential into kinetic, and the kinetic energy is your magnetic field. Think of it like drag on an airplane as it goes through the sky. If you were to accelerate that airplane, you're going to get more drag. So the magnetic field is kind of like the drag of the charges that are going through the ether. The more you accelerate it, the more you're going to get drag on the space itself. And that drag is what gives you the magnetic field.
No, I understand that. I was looking for a way to get voltage while creating an amp motor and have it already pre-built into the system. That's what I was looking for.
So like an amp motor, are you saying like we were discussing with the
If I straight up took a round magnet, put it on a basic wheel thing, and spun it, and then I basically just put the wire to it, it would give me a whole lot of amps, not a whole lot of volts, right?
you're getting there. That's
So,
one thing that
well, that's why I want the electric, because now I can
that
put in
that
the voltage back into the amperage and have a usable energy.
right. When you understand that all you got to do is spin an electric disc to produce a magnetic field, and that electric disc is already highly charged, you have Tesla's dual thing, right? So all you need is to spin an electric disc, you get the magnetic field, and you get that high current at the same time. So yeah, you're right. All you need to do is spin an electric disc, and the bigger the diameter, the bigger the outside speed is, because the speed's proportional to the diameter of that disc.
Oh yeah.
So the bigger that disc is as an electric and spins, that you're going to get huge power. And this is where electrics are important, because you can do it with magnets, but why not have like a 10,000 volt disc spinning that produces a magnet by spinning? You got all the current and voltage you want.
So hold on, just hear me out. So when we look at Troy Reed's device, and he does that little car, that little Geo Metro, and remember I told you earlier about his motor. It has those big wheels on it. Now, if I simply made one for magnetics and then I lock the other in dielectric, I can have as much power as I want at that point, as long as they continue to spin, right?
Right. It's like, people think a magnet sitting there is what I'm getting at. Is with an electric, they think it doesn't do anything, but it takes a little bit of motion, and it takes, either field orientation to get the ether spinning, or it takes a little bit of motion to do it. But you can also do it, like you said in a previous live stream, you can do it by the field orientation. That's what the rodent coil is basically doing, is taking a toroidal spin and is taking a poloidal spin, and those two combined is what churns up the ether into a vortex. But you can literally take a physical matter of an electric field and a magnetic field, and it'll still churn up the matter with the right orientation. And that's where you get into stuff that's more of sparky sweet type of systems.
Okay. Sorry, I'm in the middle of building something, and I'm trying to get specifics.
Yeah, the motion is great to start with, because it's kind of like the wheel within a wheel thing. If you're spinning something and then spinning it even faster on an outside disc, like the Searle effect, you're churning it up physically. You're still gonna, it's still a way to do it. Solid state is what I'm trying to get at the long run, but what you're doing is still the same. Just think of the Searle effect, because those outside magnets are spinning while it's going around it. You get one? It's a wheel within a wheel, Ezekiel. So what you're saying is right.
A ball within a ball.
They were looking. God, I see that Searle device, and how do I say it? They're looking for a vortex, and they're just looking at the mechanical aspect of it, and they're not realizing that it needs to show the vortex to cool down. And they know it's what the answer is, but they're lost on how to get it because they're too much into it, because they gave them specific measurements and specific sizes and all this stuff, right? But they haven't figured out how it works. Like, how is it bringing it in? Why is it doing it? What specific energies are doing it? Because then you would change it to the right rate of what you're doing and not stick with the same thing over and over and over again. I see it all the time. It's got to cool down in the center. They got to have it an open vortex, and they just keep spinning the same thing and not realizing why it's not working.
Well, like you said in the past too, imagine if you did have the glasses to see the fields, then we'd get it. We would just, and it's perfect. It's a perfect explanation. Like when you can like, it took me a while to see the fields in my mind, because nobody has the ability to see the fields. But if you had some magical glasses to see the fields, we'd already have this, because that's all that really matters, is the field interactions going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
well, you can't see the fields of what you're talking about, but you can visualize the fields when you understand enough of the fundamentals, and then you look to nature for the answers, like we said earlier.
right.
If you just look at a shallow stream with lots of stones in it and stuff like that, and you see what the currents are all doing and how they interact, different speeds, different flow rates, how all the peaks and everything cancel each other out and then remanifest down the line. If you look at snow blowing inside
Victor
of
Schauberger. Victor
Schauberger.
You're exactly right. Victor Schauberger would see the fish going against the tide and be like, how the hell is it just stationary? It's like it's not even affecting the fish.
Yeah.
Because he studied the flow. And it's flow. Like
the flow, man. And it's the interactions of the flow. So, if you're in like a valley, or there's a dish and it's snow, right? And then you're getting wind cutting from one direction, but then also cutting through like trees, let's say, from another direction. It's coming from two separate directions, hitting this dish and causing counter rotational flows that actually dance. Yeah, and you could see the snow in it, right? You could actually visualize these things if you look around you to, whatever there is.
That's why I'm saying dizzy dog people, they can't see it because they don't even believe in ether. And that's really the first step, is to acknowledge the ether. Because we know that these flows go on, but the physicists, and that's the missing link between the dizzy dogs of the engineers can kind of say, okay, what if there is an ether? How do we test this? And we're getting results that say that there is an ether, but yet the physicists are saying, no, there's no ether. Energy is constant. And we're like, yeah, we know energy is constant. Get over it. You're a fucking dog chasing your own tail. You know what I mean? That's why
if it's dealing with the magnetic field, and that's the only thing they deal with, there's no ether. Because it can't exist in what they're looking at. You have to see all forms of magnetism in which way they work.
Right.
That's the problem. They don't understand inverting a field, and if you can't understand inverting a field, you'll never see it. If you can't get that magnet to spin and not have any effect on that copper wire, you'll never see it. You have
they do see it, but they don't define it in the same ways that we do. Like when they start banging particles into each other and stuff, and then they see all these fundamental particles kind of blast into and then out of existence in some kind of pattern. Where they go wrong is they say that it goes out of existence. It only exists for this infinitesimally small amount of time, right?
And you got virtual particles.
Right. The fact is that just as important as what they discovered particle-wise, let's say, the patterns in which it all dispersed and is probably more significant, than what they identified. Because it's
the holistic approach is, I think, what you're getting at, to see it as a holistic phenomena other than dissecting it into the smallest Bose-Einstein constant,
exactly right. It's what is it doing as a greater whole? Where are the consistencies there? When we detect these particles and they blink in and out, what's the consistency every time we detect them?
And what does it matter if they do or don't? Honestly, why do we care if they're right or wrong? I don't care. I want results.
Right. And that's where the results come from is understanding what on these impacts, what the independent physics of those particles actually more specifically is in the context. And that's not something I've heard a whole ton about, despite, listen, it's not like I went to school for it, but I'm okay, burst wise in a little bit of particle physics, and I've never really heard all too much about the short lifespan that what it does in that short lifespan beyond its size and what its spin is and what it's
if I may say, I did dive into the physics. I was into academia, and I don't like to promote my papers. I never ask for money and I never will, but if my papers, if I could sum it down, gravity and electromagnetism are the same thing. The difference is the timescales between the two. Because if you take the equations of gravity and break it down, it's really just the centripetal acceleration of say the moon around the Earth. When you literally break down the math equation for gravity, it's equal to the centripetal acceleration. The centripetal acceleration of particles is faster. This is where I'm saying, we refer to frequency on a low scale and time on the upper scale, because it's easier to say period or time on big scales, and it's easier to say frequencies on the bottom scales. But they're inversely proportional in the same thing. The only thing is the time rate of that centripetal acceleration is quicker on the small scale than it is on the bigger scale. That's the only difference. It's the time difference between those two scales. So gravity is electromagnetism.
I took about 45 minutes of my time to watch a guy build a scalar field and call it every name in physics in the book except for what it was. And I sat there and I just watched him describe exactly how the musical scale goes in octaves. And I'm waiting for him to say it. I'm like, come on, you can say it. And he would not say it. Yet the picture is perfectly clear. You can literally overlap them and it would be perfect. And it was like he was so proud of himself. And I just thought to myself, this is the most ignorant thing I've ever watched today. Why in the world are you not putting this in there? Like, this was the answer the whole time.
They want views. They don't, it's all about
Well,
views these days.
Look, even a dog that chases its tail got to shit sometime, right? So you, you know that if it's chasing its tail while it shits, it's going to shit in its face. So there is a time where everybody stops chasing their tail. Now, whether or not they choose to use the same words we use is secondary to the fact that the observations are the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be frustrating when they're not attributing the language to it, but at the same time, if what they're describing is exactly the same, then there's no sense in dicing, the fine points.
The thing is,
don't eat the yellow snow.
They're arguing. Okay, we know that the speed of light is c, right? If you higher the frequency, you shorten the wavelength. Just because c is one of those things that if you do a higher on the one, the other one has to be lower to keep that c constant. That's the same thing with energy. And they're trying to say, like, if you higher this and lower that, but you're always going to get the same energy in and out, period. And we know that. We're not saying that you're wrong. We're not claiming free energy. I've specifically said free power. And Tesla called it power magnification. And it's the power. And that's it, period. So if you're looking at the energy, you're a dizzy dog. You know what I mean? In my opinion, you're just going to drive yourself crazy.
One thing I would say that I disagree with is they say more power in, more power out, right? Well, in a closed system, that's 100% right. But if I pull that energy out of the environment around me, I can break that system.
Absolutely.
And I'll give you a perfect example. Sean sat there with this spool of wire and used it as the ground. Yet it's pulling energy out of the spool of wire and bringing it into a Tesla coil, right? It's the perfect example of pulling energy from the room into that spool back to its Tesla coil as a suction pump, right? So
yeah,
it's not that he created any more energy than what was in the room, but he was smart enough to use the room and the environment, the energy in it to do it. So what people need to start realizing is when you go outside, how big is it? How much energy is out there? Because it's everywhere. Tesla called it a sea of energy. You go out to space, it's still there. You're still getting the energy. It's not like it disappeared. It's just maybe not as much as it is on the surface of the Earth, but you can still pull the energy. But
it all comes down to like holographic theory, more or less. Everything is the ether. That's sort of what it boils down to. Everything
Pretty
that
much
is and isn't is the ether. It's just how compressed it is and in how it's arranged. And
that's where the separation between physics and engineering is gap, because they don't want to admit the ether, and energy is literally an ability. You know what I mean? So that's what they're not getting either. You can either call it energy the ability to do work or the potential to do work, but both of those are an abstract term. So energy itself is why they're a dog chasing their own tail, because there is no definition. It's any ability. You can have any ability. You know what I mean? An ability can't be created or destroyed. It's the ability over time that matters. And that's what Tesla was saying with power magnification. He called it power magnification. And I think we should too. Or over unity. That's a better term too. But free energy is stupid. It's just a key word. And I had to say free power because, I want a couple of views to get people interested. But the true terminology is over unity or power magnification, not free energy.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think
all energy is actually free.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely.
They misunderstand the no free lunch term. Okay, let me just explain this. There's no free lunch to run the primary mover. That's correct. But there is a free lunch in pulling it out of the air because the earth already created it for you. You didn't create it. Or it trapped it in, if you want to say it that way, instead of saying created.
Well,
open systems are completely different. Open systems, they know that thermodynamics with open systems violate physics. Open systems is not, in order to go into thermodynamics, it has to be a closed system because they know that open systems, first of all, violates that. Second of all, it's thermodynamics, not electrodynamics. We know a diode can separate like the Maxwell's demon, where Maxwell's demon can have a hot particle and a cold particle and separate them both sides. That's what a diode is, but it's an it's not a thermodynamic, it's an electrodynamic phenomena. So you can do stuff in electronics that is not even related to thermodynamics and get away with Maxwell's demon because it's not thermodynamic when you're in that field. It's electrodynamic.
So here's another dizzy dog for you, okay? It seems to be general consensus, okay, that you can't exploit physics to create energy and power, okay? Like because that's where this whole conversation gets shut down, except all generation of energy and power is exploitation of physics. And they say, well, you can't, you really can't get more than you put out than you put in, out. And it's just basically an energy exchange at that point, and it runs at low efficiency. But then you do something like make a hydro dam, right? And all you got to do is build that wall once, and then as long as there's water pressing up against it, you're exploiting physics to be able to spin a turbine to be able to create that energy at the end.
Ultimately,
that's the point that I'm making is like there's analogous things to the water flow through the turbine to make the spin, right?
And it's not the water level that makes the power difference there. It's the sun evaporating the water into the atmosphere and providing all this to us for free. The water just doesn't magically go uphill.
Right. It doesn't exactly. It's a symbiotic relationship of the environment and then exploiting the gravitational force of the water at that point and the flow of the water to sit there and
but it's as long as the sun exists, you can do that. You know what I mean? So, and it all goes like if you want to get down to the root, then how did the Big Bang even happen? If energy, that argument, it basically boils down to that. Like, how do we even have this discussion right now?
Yeah, I think the Big Bang is just, going from the outside of the field to the inside of the field, my man. That's what I think.
I think you're right. Yeah. Like there's endless Big Bangs, you know what I mean?
It's still banging. It never stopped. It never stopped banging.
A lighter.
Hey, God's busy.
You zoom into any plasma and it's going to resemble the large scale structure of our universe.
Yeah. Then you get to float around the middle of like the null zone for a while before you get dumped out the ass.
Like purgatory.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, null zone. It's like, oh well, and then they'll look at it and they'll say in astrology, right? It's like astronomy. You're looking out at the outer reaches, and it's like just going to be like this endless disbursement until it's like, well, no kidding. That's how the hourglass works. Everything get closer until it starts all getting further away. So by doing that measure, you know exactly where you stand in the flow of the whole thing.
I just think it's so silly how nihilists say that not even this discussion exists. Like nothing exists. Really, how do you take that standpoint? The complete opposite of what we're saying is everything exists, right? So how do you I don't understand nihilists to actually say, it's depressing to me to even step for a second into that mind frame. Like it just doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Like we obviously know that we're having a conversation, and for a nihilist to say that nothing exists is beyond me. I just can't understand.
That becomes like I think therefore I am is sort of the deal. You can go into all sorts of deep philosophical reasons as to why we all exist.
Is that
You know,
different than
or whether
the
or not
Matrix people?
anybody even exists other than you, or whether we all exist on the same plane or a different plane.
That's what I was getting at with the baby born without senses. Is I sense, therefore I exist, because in order to think, you have to sense your reality.
Mm-hmm.
So even a deeper root from thinking is sensing. So a primeval statement would be I sense. And nothing touches when it comes to physical objects and stuff. So what the hell is even sensing? But we know it's real. You know what I mean? So
Well, it's real.
we
It's real
can't.
because it's your experience. So yeah. Sometimes you have to take that for exactly what it's worth. The fact that you
Yeah.
wake up in the morning and your neck hurts because you slept on your pillow the wrong way or whatever. Or, if you're like me, you want to amputate your right arm every night and then reattach it in the morning because you don't know what the hell to do with it to not have a shoulder pain. But like that's what existence is.
Right. And
Grinding it
I
out
think
at work to pay your bills.
Yeah.
I think what you're getting at is the point, though. Like, we can break it down to study the most minute details of the universe, or we can see it holistically and just say, look, this is what we observe as engineers. You physicists can break it down into infinity, and you're just going to be a dog chasing your own tail.
Yeah, but
We want to have
those people also need deeper enlightenment too, because there are things just beyond the mundane of physical reality too. So go find that. But if you have a hard time believing that anything exists, then what would be the motivation in finding anything greater? And there you go. There's another dizzy dog for you chasing their own tail.
Yep. Yeah. Inspiration, faith is huge to me. I don't know, to live life without any faith. I mean, just to flick the light on, I have faith that the light's going to come on. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
To have no faith in anything is really frightening in a way.
Yeah, sadly,
Yeah.
I've known plenty of people in my life that have no faith, and it's very difficult to be, very difficult to live with that because everything, is never, nothing's ever going to go right at that point.
Right. Yeah.
Nothing's ever going to go right. And that's a miserable way to live.
Yeah.
It is. I wish I could share this in, but you guys kind of get what I'm saying. The whole point with the dizzy dog was just to say, sometimes you should think outside the box instead of terming something like, engineers say, yeah, we know energy. We know what you're saying, but think of it like this, and they just can't because they're trained in mathematics and they can't break outside the mathematics. So there's a huge separation between physicists and engineers, and we just got to tread the avenue through obvious experiments that show that they're wrong in order for them to get enlightened. That's the only way they can get enlightened, is through programs like we're trying to do, to where and anybody can jump on and disagree, because I don't know, I like to be proven wrong because it helps me understand more. None of us are saying that you're not welcome to come on here like we're doing and hash it out. That's what we want, because ultimately we're all in it for the same reason. We all have faith that there is anti-gravity and all these exotic type of alternative energy systems. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. So stop being a dog chasing your own tail and just jump on here, hash it out. And Nathan's very welcome to anybody that if you just send him an email and say, look, this is what I want to discuss, he'll have you on here. And it's what we got to do. It's a slow pace, but we're getting there.
That's the way to do it. I mean, Toymaker said, I feel like you guys need to pick a path and stop combining the aether particles into some kind of fringe theory. I mean, listen, you don't need to agree with the things that we're saying, and
That's
at the end of the day, you've been around here for a long time, and I've always seen you in there, and you've always had good and solid things, and I know that you agree with some, if not all of the things that, well, most of the things that we say, oftentimes,
Most.
you know,
Yeah.
whether or not you like the way that we package it. I mean, look, we're just trying our best. That's what it
Right.
boils down to.
You're like, nobody's gonna completely agree with any one person because
And I
Well,
wouldn't
hold
want
on.
that. It's the disagreement
yeah.
where the learning happens, man. Like that's,
Right.
you know, I'm not closed minded to be like, well, that's wrong, unless if
You can't.
you're
You
talking
gotta
about
have.
communism.
You gotta have a little bit of thick skin and be a man. You know what I mean? Like if we say I think you're wrong for this reason, you know, we're not trying to beat you up or anything. You know.
No, I think he was trying to make a different point, though. Okay.
Yeah.
He was trying to make a point of every time that we go back and we start talking about the theories that they already came up with, they've already ruined them. They've already destroyed any, foreseeable way for that thing to work. So when you call it that, everybody has a negative connotation in their mind based on that. So if I say ether, you're going to think magnetic theory, okay? And you're immediately just going to throw it out. Because if I told you magnetic theory was ether, you told me I'm wrong and you'd be right. The problem is we have to come up with a terminology that's based in, engineers terms that really just tells us what's going on. And that's why I try to say some things very simply, and I avoid saying certain words, and I avoid saying physics terms, because I don't want to be associated with that, because the first thing I'll get is somebody arguing with the term instead of arguing with the actual physical content of what I'm dealing with. And
I'm guilty of that too, though. I'll argue on a certain term, just because I do feel like sometimes it needs to be correct. When we, say certain things, it can't be misconstrued as other things. And
no, I understand, but you have to understand how the physical actual device works. So
right, holistically.
yeah, because I don't see magnetic fields, like everybody else does. Everybody else says electron, and here's the electron. I see the electron is just an impedance field. That's all I see it as. It's basically the impedance in your magnets when you put it next to copper. That's the way
you can
I see
ask
it.
100 people what an electron is, and you're going to get 100 different answers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I see an
also
electron as the
bear this in
negative
mind.
charge carrier.
Bear this in mind, right? And it's been brought up 100 times that this stuff is, it's been known as long as time, right? This is lost, rediscovered, lost, rediscovered, lost, rediscovered. There
Mhm.
are ancient texts out there that will explain all of this to you, all in, hyperbole, more or less.
Emerald tablets of Thoth.
Right. And guess what? You're going to have to be able to get out of it, like, what's meant to get out of it. Not only you're going to have to be able to read in between the lines and kind of see what they're trying to get at rather than what they're saying, but you're also going to have to be reading, 3,000-4,000 pages worth of material to kind of get your feet wet. So, again, putting it in modern, common person English, coming up with, analogs and stuff like that, just so people get the gist. And every so often, things overlap that probably have no business overlapping, but, there's people understand in different ways, right? So that's why we explain the same things over and over again 100 different ways constantly.
Yeah.
Really, it's
But
true.
I got to stop trying to be such a stickler for the terminology because, it really is just about stepping in other people's shoes and just saying, look, if you get results, that's what matters. It doesn't matter if you call an electron a hairball. I don't care. But if you can show that the hairball does this or that, then okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, to me, it's more important when you're sitting there on that device and you're looking at it, and one word doesn't help you fix the problem. Describing what's going on in the system helps you fix the problem. So you could tell me all the terminology you want. I need about a 4-word answer is all I'm looking for with the main target things I'm looking for to fix it. That's it. If you could spend 2 hours talking to me and waste your time, okay? I can't hear that well, number one. Number two, you better be very specific in what you're talking about, okay? Because that's the only way we're getting to understand each other, okay? This wire goes here, and this is it. Okay, and then don't even bother trying to tell me the theory behind the wire. Just tell me that it goes there. That's all you got to do. And then you know what? When it's done, I'll put in my hearing aids and we'll hash it out, and then that'll be that. But
the wire is not even existent. It's just a bunch of electromagnetic field. It's like, shut up, get to the point. You know what I mean? I absolutely agree. Like, I hate going down rabbit holes. It's just a waste of time, and I just want to get to the point. That's the whole thing, is to help people understand, give them a good, because a lot of people I've talked to on Facebook here recently that are discouraged because they try and they don't even know where to start sometimes. And I think the good thing about this channel is we're trying to, weed out the BS and give you a path that is promising. We're trying to lead by example, and we're not trying to go into the whole theory, because like I said, I have physics papers and stuff, but I don't like to go into the physics. I like the engineering aspect of it. We don't go into politics or anything. We're a channel that's just focused on engineering, and we try to provide a good pathway, lead by example. If you disagree, then come on and hash it out, because we want you to do that. I want to be disproven.
Yeah, really. In fact, I think that having the alternative opinion on here more often, I wish people would be more inclined, because, that's where the learning takes place. And trust me, it's nice to have people that are like-minded and in agreement and can sit there and bounce the same exact ideas off of each other in different words back and forth constantly. And that's cool. But really, hashing it out in disagreement is that's where the problems get ironed out. So, right. And I think that's great. I think people should take us up on that.
I think what's really cool is when you listen to one of the videos, you could simply just make a Tesla coil based on what we're telling you, because I'm telling you where to plug the wire in. I'm not telling you the theory. I'm not going to bother you. I'm just going to tell you where to solder this thing. And then there's the power button, and we're just going to, you know what I mean? You can call it caveman physics all you want. I'm good with that. You know what I mean? Right. I used to use that as my handle on my Xbox 360 as caveman. But because that's the way I like it.
I don't want to mention names, but I have a feeling that somebody was about to call me out, because he's a physicist and I'm an engineer. My degree is engineering and his is physics. And he goes and says, if you don't know calculus, you don't know what you're saying. But I'll tell you straight up, Steinmetz used trigonometry. So, it doesn't matter what your math skills are or anything like this. To say that you know something better because you know calculus instead of trigonometry, you're just mentally masturbating yourself, in my opinion. You're not putting your hands on things and making the world better. I mean, we can all talk about theory all day long, but let's come together as a group and
hold on. Let me just say this about math, and I'll be very clear about this. Give somebody the formula, give them 2 examples of how the problem works, and the rest is just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. That's all that it is. All you have to know is the formula and which way to run it. Okay? And for engineers, that's the easiest thing in the world. Okay, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. We're done. Hey, see you later. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's as simple as it gets. You don't need to overthink it.
You're not going to make anything with calculus. You're exactly right. Like, Steinmetz used trigonometry and geometry. It's more of a geometrical. Engineers think visually, artistically. You know what I mean? And calculus is infinitesimals. That is a dog chasing its own tail. Just think of it geometrically, like Nathan's saying, like, you plug this into the red port and you plug this into the black port and you got a green port in the middle.
That's right. Yeah, that's why I like it. Keep it simple. 10 parts or under so everybody understands. You know what I mean? And if it's just I consider buying a board off the shelf 1 part. You know what I mean? Because you're not putting that thing together. You're just buying it. So
true.
It's not a big difference there. So yeah, use whatever you want and put it together. The one thing I always see when people build my cider circuit, they build it backwards first because they go traditional. and they fry the transistor immediately. And then everything else doesn't work. So they get frustrated. And if you just followed the directions instead of thinking for yourself, we'd be okay. We could just get it done and we'd have a great day, right? I see it all the time. It's you know what I mean? Because I get I thought it was an NPN. No, I specifically told you it was PNP. And then they go, well, you can't run cold energy because you're running the negative through the circuit. And I go, then why did they make the PNP in the first place? You know what I mean? Like, what were they thinking? I mean, this is not possible. This is, a whole revelation. So if I tell you I run an NPN backwards and I run it through the negative, why is that such a hard thing to understand? As long as I put a draw on the other side to pull it through, that's not hard. I mean, that's all cold energy circuits are, is they keep the heat out of the system so you lose the hysteresis and you have less loss. That's the whole point of the system. It runs the same way. It's not like you're changing the energy too much. And then without the heat, you don't get the amperage. So you don't get the field that the electrons create in order to get cogging in your circuit. So now you can run the magnets as fast as you want.
But anytime you want, you can convert that cold electricity to the heat if you want. You know what I mean?
Oh, you can. You flip it.
You know that. Yeah. So it's, cold is really where to study. And, there's some things where I disagree with some people on here with that, because I think literally electric current can be viewed almost like a refrigerant, and you can freeze things if you know what you're doing with electric current.
Oh, you can.
But room temperature and below is a perfect term. Nathan says room temperature and below, and just start there. But if you get deep into it, then there are what would seem miraculous, but it's just physics, engineering. I'm not even going to say physics, you know what I mean? Because they're dizzy dogs.
Well, hang on one second with that, though, because that's where society really screwed the pooch on this one. Was, they obviously there's a great need out there for specialists of anything. And it's excellent to be an expert in the field of something, right? But realistically, either being a jack of all trades or some type of polymath, that's going to get you further each and every time. Because, whenever you confine yourself into a box of a single expertise, you'll never actually be the best at what you strive to do, because you're not getting the external experience and knowledge that you would otherwise have to then apply it in different ways within your field of expertise. And it used to be when you go to a university, the key was art, philosophy, and science. It was your classic liberal arts. You'd learn those things because in conjunction with one another, if you were proficient within all three of those realms, you could understand, think constructively, know the application through the philosophy, and then be able to put that knowledge of how it works and the philosophy of how it ought to be then artistically into something that functions. And that's the trifecta of a liberal arts polymath, more or less. And anytime you sit there and you pigeonhole yourself into one of these specialties, and you're in the academic mindset of that specialty, you're fucked.
See, and that's why it kind of concerns me being in the military and seeing the compartmentalization is basically what you're saying. Is how do we get a holistic view if it's all compartmentalized?
Exactly.
There needs to be a holistic type of mind frame, and the more you compartmentalize it, the more it's kind of detrimental for our security, because like you're saying, you're going to be extremely specialized in propulsion, but you're not going to understand, say, navigation, but to have a broad understanding and sharing this instead of compartmentalizing it will help us more so, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And you'd be better off knowing just enough about every little thing around you than just knowing about one thing up and down. That's going to be my opinion almost time in, time out.
Right.
Almost.
Yeah. And that's the thing I think at this point in history, we're like, yeah, there can be so much good, but there can be detrimental things too. But I mean, every time we've been at this juncture, we have realized that there is bad. Like you said, like, teaching somebody with a knife in the past. That's a perfect analogy. You know, a knife can be used to carve a worm getter. You can get worms out of the ground. With those worms, you can get some fish, you can get some bird, you can get, you know what I mean? If you use the knife the right way, you're golden. You can use that knife for so many good purposes.
Absolutely.
But you can
And if you know
also,
how to make that knife, then you can make a knife for you and every one of your friends.
That's right.
yeah.
And if you know what rocks to throw in the fire, then you know how to get the metal for the knife, right? It's
That's
all
where
just the relevance of it. We're all codependent in this society, right? Like
right.
you could never have anything that you have in modern society if it wasn't carried on the backs of 1,000 other people. Like
Yeah.
that's
But there
just
has
sort
to
of
be a point. There has to be a point though where we break through, like where people were thinking that the internet was the devil back, and now everybody's like, oh, without the internet, like where would we be? You know what I mean? Like there has to be a point, a breakthrough, and it takes the faith to have faith in the goodness of humanity to pass that. To know that yes, there is evil things that you can do with it, but the overall good is where you have to
Okay.
focus on.
well, it made information accessible and cheap. Like so, where you would have no business knowing something previously, and you would have to go to a library and find the right book
That's
and
the
the right part
economics
of the
of
book,
it. Yeah.
and that sort of thing, or talk to the right person, which you don't even know who that could even possibly be.
Mhm.
And today it's just as simple as having the question and looking at a few different answers and weeding it out for yourself.
So I just wanted to answer this in the chat. We need superconductors, probably, is what he says, right? You do understand that part of this, when I tell you to bring in the environment from the room, is to create a room temperature superconductor. I mean, that's the whole goal of it. There's no other way to say it. That's the goal. I mean,
agree.
it's going to get a little bit colder, may get a lot colder, but it started out as basically room temperature, and as long as you can drop it a little bit below that, boom, you're set. You have energy that's, I mean, I want to put it this way. It's not that the fact that the thing is cold. It's where the cold came from. It's like blowing a fan on something, right? You're not cold yet, but then blow the fan on it, you're going to be cold, right? So what does that mean? That means there's energy coming to it that wasn't before. So it's now obtaining more energy into it. That's the whole point of a room temperature superconductor. We don't want to dip it in some solution and get it super cold. We want the environment to do it. That's
Well,
what we're looking
So
for.
correct me if I'm
What's
wrong here.
truly detrimental about a little bit of a resistance anyways? Why do you want zero resistance anyways when you can get away with it with a little bit of resistance? Like, you don't have to have a superconductor.
But to humor the superconductor thing for a second, though, in a field like Nathan's saying, okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, but realistically, what you're trying to do is reach a level of saturation in a certain area, and then also have whatever's in that area also reach those same levels of saturation, creating an equilibrium that would be your superconductor at that point, at
You
whatever
can artificially,
temperature it is. At whatever, it
yeah.
doesn't have to be cold.
Even through magnetocaloric effect would be a perfect example of what you're getting at there. Like there are ways that where if you wanted to drop the temperature, you could to get it to the superconductive state, but you don't have to have a superconductor. You don't. I mean, a little resistance. I mean, Tesla did it without superconductors. Just think how Tesla did it. I mean,
there was a question in the chat.
Hold on. I just want to, before we get there, the whole idea is the saturation of the coil with multiple things that you can pull out of it. So the more lines that I can pull out of that coil while continuously keeping that saturation level at the same level, that's what you want. That's the over unity or the free energy, however you wanted to say it. That's it. That's what you want. So when I say that in the videos and I say, oh, I only have one wire pulled out of this coil and it's running this to that capacitor, some people think that's the end of the line. No, no, no. I can pull 10 more wires out of that same coil, and now I can set up 10 more capacitors. You're not multiplying what I'm doing. You didn't see it that way. So I'm telling you now, when you look at that experiment, now see it that way. So I try to use one to run a motor. If I can accomplish 2 to run a motor and I have 8 more left, guess what? I can run, you know what I mean? What, 4 more motors? That's kind of the point, is the over unity part of it, or the excess energy is in that saturation. So as long as you keep it saturated, you're good to go. You can take as much out as you want. It's like a cup that's always full. You always go in and dip your cup and it's always full. That's the point. That's the saturation level. So anyway, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, so it looks like it, what is it? Rudiger Stein said, can water set under the correct vibration serve as a superconductor? His guess is that it can. I mean, that's an interesting, way to think about it. If you replace the word vibration with just resonance, generally, I would say the answer is yes, because that coincides directly what we're saying. However, what I found interesting about the question is the vibratory element of it, because not as a superconductor per se, but the interesting thing about water in atmosphere, at surface level, at atmosphere where it meets, right, is your surface tension. And if you actually do vibrate water, it could break droplets off the surface, and at different frequencies at that point, there you can actually float a drop of water on the surface of the of water through its own surface tension differentials.
Aroma diffusers do that.
Right. So right, exactly.
John Keely did that too.
Seen that a million times, and that goes along too with ionization of water, right? So if you ionize water and then you have a sheet of water, the ionized water will actually sheet off the regular water because it's a different resonance.
It's like the whole hype about fog with electricity, because the surface area of the small droplets is giving you that large electric field that's possible, compared to the, like you're saying, the surface area of water is just giving you that surface area. But if you put it into droplets, like what I'm trying to do with aggregates and the electrodes is the same principle. Like if you put it into a fog, you're going to have a higher surface area to work with. And then when you get into the nanoparticle realm, it breaks physics, and they know that. When it gets into nanoparticles, it doesn't behave the way that physics predicts it should. The smaller you get and the more surface area you get, that's
well, right, then stuff starts acting more like it would at near absolute zero type temperatures.
Exactly.
That's how it starts to act, is more in tune with that, because it's not bound by the same constraints at that point. Now at that point, the small fine particles could pass through other larger pieces of matter and so on, and permeate.
Right.
They have permeation abilities and stuff.
Even quantum tunneling type of effects that they call it, engineering. It's basically the same thing. They're just basically, it's just a term that, where physics breaks, but it's an engineering observation.
Yeah, it is. And it's no different than the plasmoid breaking loose in the thunderstorm generator and dancing on the outside of the pipe. It's the same type of idea.
Right.
By the way, the harmonics is so much more important than people think. You were talking about it before with the bell ringing and how much longer it can ring. And people don't realize that at all, by the way. That was a great point to put out there, because they just think Tesla coils super fast. They've never built one that's really slow, right?
They never read
20
the
hertz,
patents.
it rings forever. It just, yeah. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, even at 20 hertz, you can have whatever in frequency you want, even in the megahertz, running it off of 20 hertz. You know,
Well,
that's what I'm
so
saying.
if you
Yeah.
want to throw the energy across the room from a Tesla coil, put it in
Right.
low hertz, then
That's what I wanted to show with the simulation. Like I put 10
ah,
watts in, and it's 100 times. It's basically broadcasting almost 1,000 watts of energy off the simulation. I simulated it with real components, and I want to get to building it. There are things in life that are prohibiting me, and I have to live vicariously through you and Sean because I don't have the equipment you guys have, but I share it because I get so excited when you guys learn it and build it, and you know, you and Sean and people that have these things, like a lot of people in chat are looking up to that. You know, they don't have the means that some of us do have, and we do live vicariously, and it's exciting. And I love getting shout outs to people in chat where they do recommend things, and it happens. You know, they deserve those shout outs. You know what I mean? And it's just, you know, I don't have the means to really experiment. There's things going on in my life, but you know, as a group, we can all achieve where we think we need to go. Not one person can do it.
Yeah, it's all the small contributions add up to one great whole, don't they? And
I'll tell you
Especially
this
chat.
right now.
Chat is
My-
crazy. Like everybody says, chat is crazy. Smart.
Oh, dude, all the money that comes off my YouTube channel goes right into parts. It goes into, you know what I mean, little devices so that I can check, or meters, or what do you want to call it. All of it goes into there. And some of my, you know, money from my regular checks goes in there. So I dump a ton of money into this thing all the time,
Right.
just to figure out the next level. Because sometimes that meter's like $300, man, and you got to save for a little while and get it. Yeah, but you have to have it.
I guess I'll say it, but one time Sean said, "Look, this meter's cheap," and I looked it up. It was $300. I'm like, "It's cheap to you, bro."
Yeah, to him it's cheap.
Yeah,
Sean cracks me up with that too.
That's why I'm literally making my own. I'm literally making my own meter, you know, because I'm trying to work with what I have and trying to make it, you know, to where people realize you don't have to have expensive meters to kind of get into it. You know, it's nice to have them, but it's also fun to just, you know, scrap things together and learn. You know, I like the scrap kind of aspect of it. You know, but it was funny. He was like, "It's cheap." And I'm like, "Bro, I wish it was cheap. You know, that takes me a while to save up for." And I know that's not much, but a lot of us feel pinched right now. The economy is not the greatest.
Oh yeah, it's like, hey, why don't you go out and buy this winder? It's a $300 winder. What? How about I just print it off and I buy the motor? Is that okay? Can I just do that?
Yeah,
we still be friends afterwards? Because that's what I have to do.
This is why I stick to the philosophy end of things.
Yeah. like you need a spark gap chamber. Ooh, do they make that in a ball glass? Right? You know what I mean? Pickling jars, and they're like, well, maybe. That's what I can use.
I wanted to bring it back.
My vacuum chamber, right? Or sorry,
yeah.
This is my vacuum chamber.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I want to bring it back for a second. To when you were talking about the Tesla coil ringing, right?
Yeah.
I want to draw an analog for people on that with the bell that we were talking about before, right? So, why does a bell ring as long as it does? There's various reasons, but what keeps it ringing the longest? And the answer is it not being dampered, right? That's sort of the answer. So with the Tesla coil, you know, the analog there would be that to keep it ringing longer, it just has to be separate from its dampering environment. So the less diffusion that you necessarily have off of it, the tighter it is on itself, then it should ring longer at that point because it's isolated from the environment that would otherwise act as a dampening force against it. So
absolutely,
you know, that I think that's a key component to show you how my mind works, at least. But the analogs, right? That's how it is, right? Because if you were to sit there and just put a piece of felt up against that bell, it's not going to ring out like it did, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the
Correct.
less that's acting externally on it, the longer it could just sit there and ring out, and then the more you get out of it.
If I could share this patent from Tesla, it's along the lines of what you're saying. I know it won't share my simulations, but let's see if it shares this real quick, because that's a huge point. The dampening factor is pretty much what you're saying is what you need to eliminate, and even for a physical belt. But it's, you know, it's the same thing for electronics and everything. And you can do things with electronics easier than you can with actual fluids, you know, because you're on that nanoscopic type scale. Let me just see if I can pull it up real quick. But is it
By the
sharing?
way, the energy that you pull out of there on the secondary coils, if you had a running system and had that going on, that amplification is huge, because you're hitting that resonant bell in that, you know, thing that's already going.
Right, because it's in a state of equilibrium in the resonance, you know, at that point. So it's unimpeded, undampered by its surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Can you see the title of the patent?
It's very small for me, so
It's entitled "Means for Increasing the Intensity of Electrical Oscillations." Patent number 685,012 by Tesla. So he was actually, like Joe was saying, Joe Fuchsius, like the dampening factor is really hard. And I think that's what the chat member with the superconductors was talking about. But this is how Tesla was doing it without superconductors. And you don't necessarily have to have zero resistance to do it. A little bit of resistance, okay. Superconductors are an idealized type of oscillating bell, you know, but you don't have to have zero resistance. And he was doing it, you know, by basically refrigeration methods. So, you know, he had a grounded coil that came up, and he was refrigerating these coils to get the intensity of the oscillations higher. But when you do that, it's actually a slower frequency. And that's why you can run a 20 hertz signal through something and get kilohertz out if you want. You know, so it's not about the frequency in the boost stage. You know, the colder these coils get by refrigeration that he was using, the slower the frequency is going to be. It's inversely proportional to the resistance. So actually slower frequencies in the beginning are best, and that's why he could boost the system into like a bell with the earth, because the earth has a slow Schumann resonance. You know.
do you know how he was refrigerating it?
Yeah, let me.
Is
Are
he
you
like
still seeing my?
old school? Like is he like using ice brine? Or
Well, he would actually put CO2 through a small nozzle and let it expand.
Okay.
And then he would mix wood pulp with ice, you know,
Mm-hmm.
deionized ice, and use that as the insulation. It was a mixture of wood pulp and ice, and that's kind of what led me through, you know, the electric exploration, because he was using electric materials to insulate his transformers and everything.
Didn't they
And
build the battleship out of that one time?
I'm not
There's
sure.
a name for that material when you mix sawdust with ice or water and then freeze it.
Is there?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
That's really...
it stays frozen forever and a day.
Really?
Can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah.
I can see it, yeah.
If you guys don't mind chatting for just a second, I'll show you how he was freezing. Like, he used the freezing method to increase the oscillation period and the Q factor, because the colder it gets, you know. So basically he was taking a refrigerator and using that like serpentine coil as a primary. You know what I mean? Like, instead of serpentining it back and forth, he was just wrapping it around a primary. So it was a combination of refrigeration and everything, but he was able to do it at such an efficient rate So because the bell is going to augment the power output anyways, but by freezing it, you can get even higher efficiency.
So
Okay.
check this out. Charlie C was running his Tesla coil with a computer pump, the water pump from a computer, and it puts the cool looking liquid through it, right? But it had the same effect. It was cooling it as he was, pumping it, and he can use that as his primary.
That's cool.
It was really cool, man, because you put green stuff in there, put a bunch of lights on it. It just, I don't know. I wanted to build it just because it was cool looking.
Oh, good looking out awareness. It's Pycrete. Then that's definitely right, because that rings my bell in my head as to what it was called.
You said Pycrete?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely made a ship out of that one time, and it stayed frozen for like years.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Jarvis, where do you get all these patents at?
Wikipedia, if you put in list of Nikola Tesla patents, it'll put a Wikipedia page up. Can you see where I'm at right now?
You can't see that part of it, no.
You can't see where I'm at?
No. I could see the page you're on. I cannot see the fact that it's Wikipedia that sent you there.
Yeah, if you put in on Google list of Nikola Tesla patents, it'll bring you to where I'm at right now.
Very cool.
Okay. Cool.
Might be. All right, I'm just going to quickly look through these and see if it's the one I'm talking about. Yeah. Well, this is how he would insulate it. So manufacturer of electrical condensers and coils. He put it in a vacuum and introduced some gas to pressurize it at one point, and then he would use conventional electric materials like Hanabu wax and beeswax and everything to basically keep a charged capacitor. I mean, I believe he was making electrodes, and my goal is to make monopolar electrodes, because that type of an electrode would be a bipolar electrode. But monopolar electrodes seem interesting. It's never been invented, so
I was going to say, good luck cracking that one. Let me know when you get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be strictly one pole. It's going to be like more positive than negative kind of thing. I mean, obviously, you're not going to have a ball of protons or a ball of electrons.
Yeah, asymmetric.
Right. You're going to have a separation, but even if it's a separation of the charges on a positive and negative, you can theoretically just run a electrostatic motor just by having a material that are polarized like that. That so that's one potential that I want to get there. But this is the freezing method that he was using.
That's cool. Yeah, it's like a heat exchanger.
Yeah, he was getting into refrigeration. That's what people like. This is literally cold electricity that he's getting into. But I believe he was actually able to use current itself as a refrigerant. But these are methods he would use to cool the oscillations. And yeah, there's a lot of things that people don't know what Tesla was doing, and if you investigate, you can find these type of things that he was doing. It's no lie. I'm not making things up. You know what I mean? Like it's all Tesla. He was a brilliant, like Faraday was a brilliant experimenter too, but Tesla was a great builder that just laid a foundation, and just through his patents, it's almost like a manual to what you can do to get to the level he was at. A lot of his first patents were motors and things, but his later patents get into the radiant energy, and the radiant energy is what I'm talking about with boost belling. He was literally using those types of methods. This is a good patent that I was trying to find. Now, this is.
By the way, that radiant energy is so different than regular energy. I don't know how to describe it. It doesn't act in the same way. But when I pull it out of that Tesla coil to the center, it doesn't act the same as any kind of voltage or any kind of amperage or anything else. It's completely unique. It builds out like a gas. Where did Jarvis go?
Uh-oh.
I think he tried to
I
stop
think
sharing
he
the
shared
screen.
himself out.
Yeah, we'll have to look at that. I'd like to see exactly what Tesla's words were on that because I heard it from Linderman. He was telling me it talks like a gas, which is exactly what I experienced. So I'd like to hear Tesla's, words on it specifically. Be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think that when we have Eighth Center on, I don't see him in the chat today, but I think when we have him on and he talks about some of the orgonite energy generation, I think that that'll help tie some of the ideas together, and it'll be worth the wait on that too.
You're gonna have to send me some more information on that, Joe, because I don't know a lot.
Yeah, no, and he literally wrote the book on it, literally. So, he's I think that getting it straight from the horse's mouth in that case would be best bet.
I meant to close the share screen and I exited out of the whole thing.
We thought you did.
But yeah, I mean, he's provided everything, but not many people have the patience to, read it and just do what he said.
Well, I think if you do the experiments and then read it, or if you read it, did the experiments, then read it again, it would mean a whole lot different thing the second time around, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Because now you can start to see what he's doing.
Don Smith did that. Like, somebody asked him, have you heard of Tesla? And Tesla's a relatively new name, if you will. Like, I remember studying Tesla before people even knew his name. And Don Smith was asked if he knew Tesla, and he's like, Tesla, and he had to research, and then he was like, oh, I see what he's doing, and he, and as he learned what he was doing, it helped Don Smith progress along the lines that he went to. And I think Don Smith's for real. I'll say it. There are engineers that I think are for real, and I'll back them up. I know Thomas Henry Moria was real. I know Tesla was real. I know Don Smith was real. Benitez is a really good start. If you want to get into it, I would start with Benitez. He's a really good start.
Nice.
Very cool.
All right. Let's talk in the chat. One person saying free energy out of Africa. Got John Bigman saying, nah, he's a fraud. Never heard of the guy, though. Listen, fraud or not, I always like finding out what people are blowing smoke up our ass about, too, because usually there's half truths in it. Got to extrapolate out the nonsense, whether it's true or not,
I was just watching that about the guy who used radio frequencies in order to drive a vehicle.
Oh, right. We talked about this guy one time now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, we did.
So I doubt that it's radio frequency. I think they misinterpreted it. It's the frequency inside of his device. I do not think he's pulling radio frequency out of the air unless it is a primer circuit. And that is, basically the primary circuit. And then that's pulling the energy in. Unless he's doing that, you can't get it from radio frequency. He could get it as a radio frequency as he runs it and it goes around, but not the way it was being described. You would have to define better what he's saying.
Have you heard of
there are antennas that I've heard of before where they're like arrays that are set up where they're alternating cones, right? And there's some cones that kind of stick out and then other ones that are inverse to it going the other way. And apparently these are really, really high efficiency at picking up a wide spectrum of wave frequencies and then condensing them. As far as capturing some kind of free waveform and then turning it into some kind of usable power, unless it's using that exact type of geometry, I don't know how else would be the most effective way to go about it. And how efficient something like that would be, I don't know, especially in Africa, maybe in like New York City, where you have 5G just blasting everywhere. If it wasn't in Africa, I wouldn't be skeptical.
If you're interested in radio type of effects like that, look up kilometric, auroral kilometric radiation, AKR. That is within that range, and that's the highest power output. Like I said in the past, like if you're an alien looking at the Earth, it literally puts out an AKR radiation. That's the humongous amount of power. But the thing is, because the ionosphere blocks it. So you have to have something like HARP in order to radiate into the ionosphere to resonate with it. But you can use something like HARP to do that, or you could be outside the Earth's atmosphere and use AKR radiation. But I think there's a little bit of that AKR radiation coming through that gave Thomas Henry Morey. That he's my favorite inventor, but I think that's what he was using was AKR radiation. So I have to disagree. There is a radio frequency source that you can get a humongous amount of power out of.
That's fair.
They'll have to show that.
So did he? So did the guy in Africa do it?
If he's tuning into AKR and this kilometric, so it's not microwave, it's a kilometric waveform. So it's, you know, microwave is kind of like what, gigahertz?
I'm gonna just straight up shrug my shoulders because I don't know what a kilometric waveform looks like.
So it's a kilometer long, but it's still in the radio frequency range. So you
okay, got you.
He said he was getting kilohertz of power to run a house. You see, and I saw the device. It wasn't, more than what, 1.5 by 1.5 and maybe 10 inches thick. So, and that's the one he had sitting in the vehicle. So he must have some massive receiver in there for that. And I didn't see that.
Man, I'm picturing what you just described, and that is straight bombardment, man. That is waveform bombardment at like a wild level. That's so fast.
Dude, honestly, I hope he created the real deal, and I hope it gets out to everyone because we all love inventors here. So if he's right, absolutely. I just love to see it myself.
Yeah.
This is the AKR radiation, 50 and 500 kilohertz. It's the radiation mainly comes from cyclotron radiation from electrons orbiting around the magnetic field lines of the Earth. It's absorbed by the ionosphere and therefore can only be measured by satellites positioned at vast heights. But like I said, it can leak through, or you can resonate it with like a HARP type system. But basically, like the power is really humongous. It's a huge amount of power that this radiation produces.
Isn't it one of those situations where to exploit it, all you would have to do is capture it briefly and release it, like you were talking about before, just an open and close function?
Yep. Yeah. That's what Tesla.
Then it would be modulated at that point.
Yeah, basically a modulation.
Yeah.
So even if he had a geometry coil in there like Gerald's, if he had 12 volts, if he could produce at least that much, then he can have this system no problem. Because you're going to get, 900, 1,000 volts out of that system that, for Gerald, and that's on the low end of what he does. So, yeah, I would absolutely do it if you combined it with a geometry coil, if it got at least 12 volts or, 10, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, I wish I had the glasses to see his fields. Gerald's coils, I wish I could see those fields. You know what I mean? Because they remind me of wind catchers, and like the average person just doesn't get it. But like he's like what I like to call an intuitive engineer. He's sensitive to it, and Joe, you kind of are too. When you started with crystals, that crystal that resonated with you.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are just sensitive enough to where they can sense these fields, and other people think they're crazy, but they're not. And if we had the glasses to see Gerald's coils, we'd be like, what is going on right here?
Probably looks like a spirograph, to be real. You think? If you could imagine it in motion, an in motion spirograph, that's more or less what the internal field structure would probably look like if you were just to do it to the amount of rotations would be to the geometry, right? So if you were to record that motion, that's what you would ultimately get at that high level of efficiency in the field flow.
So it's not that big of a step to say that Dreamcatchers maybe had some influence too, right?
I mean, not that far of a step, but I think that the geometry kind of looks a little different than your standard Dreamcatcher.
Well,
maybe if you're really good at weaving them.
The Dreamcatcher is more of the energy field being produced and how you see the energy field or how you should see it. The geometry itself is how it's built. So there's like 5 different phases to this. So when you look at the resonance frequency, you know how you put a speaker to water and it'll start putting out the actual frequency. When you put it in sand, it doesn't look right. But when you put it in water, it looks right. So then you start to see it right. So every single one of those on those mandalas is that right there. They're showing you the winding pattern. They're showing you the frequency. They're showing you the energy pattern. That's what all these things are. People don't realize they all go together. So on Gerald's coil, yeah, I was going to say on Gerald's coil, I think he's at the null point. His coil is literally the null point. So I think on the top of it, you're getting a vortex. I think on the bottom of it, you're getting a vortex. I think in the center, you're at the null point, which is the most amount of energy that's undefined and doesn't have top and bottom. But then as soon as you put something into it on the top, it'll come out the bottom and be something different.
It's kind of like teleportation.
Yeah.
Gerald.
It's also like, have you ever seen in cymatics? Have you ever seen a standing wave that is standing, but it's also in motion at the same time? You know, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, if you were able to visualize it, it would be something circumstantially like that. I'm not saying the same pattern. I'm just saying, you'd be looking at a standing waveform that also has rotational and motion elements to it as well. And I've seen it before where you have this pattern that just manifests from that particular frequency, but then you have circular patterns within it that is repeating, because it's usually symmetrical, 4-way symmetrical. And then you'd have the circles literally counter rotating on each other on each circle, but it's still. So, I've seen things like that before, and I feel like that's a good way to visualize some of what that coil would be doing at certain points, because it would be a standing wave at that level of efficiency to a degree.
Cymatic. Yeah, that's really the only way I can. That's a great analogy. It's hard to, but it would be like a cymatic in 3, or extra spatial dimensions, like you're saying. Almost like spatial dimensions.
That's the motion, because that motion, exactly like you're saying, it goes further than that motion. That motion's also outward and interfering other place too. Not interfering. Right. It's not interacting other place too.
So here, take a look. I'll show it to you real quick, or what I did this recently. This one right here is 180 degrees out of phase. And it's built with the center of it being a hexagon. But it looks like more than that, right? It's because every time you build a layer, you shift one. So it builds a vortex going up and a vortex going down, depending on which field that you turn on. If you turn on the red field, it goes up. If you turn on the green field, it goes down.
Oh, so the red and green are you're sending the current in 180 degrees phase?
Yes, so they're completely opposite of one another. So
cool.
Now, just in case anybody was wondering, this is a direct analog to quartz crystal structure. This is how quartz crystal lattices form. This is
and carbon.
And carbon too. Yep.
That's kind of the point, though, isn't it?
Carbon has a couple different arrangements, but yeah.
Yeah. There's so many different allotropes of carbon, but it does kind of have a lot of allotropes that are hexagonal. Yeah. But yeah, carbon's phenomenal. How many, just like silicon, you can have so many different allotropes. It's crazy that you can have diamond that's not conductive but very heat conductive, or you can have graphite or graphene that's extremely conductive. the allotropes of carbon. Carbon is a miraculous thing, like water is miraculous, and then it's just carbohydrates. Water and carbon is what we're made of. So
You say that graphene's conductive?
yeah, graphene is extremely conductive, but it's got like like Joe talked about in the past where there's certain cuts, like in one direction. Well, this is pyrolytic graphite, but from what I understand is like it looks like a honeycomb. It's hexagonal, the graphene is, and one sheet on a two-dimensional layer. If you were to look at that layer, it looks like a bunch of honeycomb cavities. And this way, it's extremely conductive, but coming this way, it's not very conductive at all.
Right, and that's all to do with the lattice structure, and that's when we talk about like being able to achieve some form of theoretical, at least directional propagation of things that have no sort of business doing that. That's really how it's achieved, is through utilization of those structures, through a crystal.
So I wanted to put that thing in water with the crystal in the center. That's the point. I wanted to see if it wouldn't light up. I want to hit the same frequencies as the crystal itself. So I'll put the crystal in the water. I'll pull the frequency out, see what it is. I'll put that exact same frequency right into there, and I have a feeling it's in low hertz.
There is a way, like you guys were discussing how to find the frequency of solid objects a while back, and I wish I was there and I could be like, I know how to do it, but what they do in aero engineering, when I was in it was an aeronautical school that I went to, what they would do is they take the solid thing and they put an accelerometer on there, and they'd hit it just like a bell, and the accelerometer will give you a frequency, but you have to do a 4-year. You have to do a Fourier transform on that frequency to get it. So it's not that big of a step after you put the accelerometer on there. You run it like you can literally, just like any software with tank circuits to find the frequency of an LRC circuit, you literally just run it through a Fourier transform, and you'll get the frequency of the object. Yeah, they use that in aeronautics.
You're gonna have to. You're gonna have to, like, if you got some kind of diagram or something, show it to me, because then I'll get the right parts and I'll do it, because that sounds really interesting to get this right.
Well, yeah, right. In aeronautics, if you're going certain velocities, and if you're going certain velocities, and you're dealing with a certain amount of friction and resistance, that's going to create certain oscillations, and there could be destructive and amplifying oscillations going through your material that's literally going to break it apart and lead to catastrophic failure. So it's no kidding that would be a critical step in that, is knowing what types of speeds or velocities that you want to just kind of break through. You can't hold those speeds, or else you'll just.
Right. That was that Embry-Riddle when they were telling me that, like, you're right, like the wings themselves, because of the turbulence that's produced behind them, even the turbulence has its own frequency. And if that's at a constructive interference with the wing shape, it can literally just pull the wing off. It would just, the wings would just fly off because of the turbulence.
It's the soldiers on the bridge is what it is.
Exactly. Yep.
My concern about these crystals, by the way, is that they put off more than one frequency. Hi, Lulu. They put off more than one frequency, because every time you hit part of the hexagon, it's a different frequency. So what I'm looking for, I guess, when we do it, is I just need to see what key of A it's in, or B or C or D, whichever. Then we can define it going on the lowest one, starting there on that.
If you identify the key, then you'll know the harmonic, because the harmonic is
exactly what I'm saying.
Yep.
Right.
And if if you know the harmonic, then you'd be able to throw things into resonance easily at that point, whether they're provided they're on the same harmonic.
Right, exactly. It's not really the octave. I know we said that in the past, kind of discussing octaves, but the octave is really the seventh key in the major scale when it comes to major or theory. So it is a harmonic of, say, C. The octave is another C, so it's a harmonic too, but it's the eighth scale. It's the eighth note in that scale. You know what I mean? So harmonics are really the multiplication or the division of an integer number of that frequency, and the harmonic is really the more important thing, not the
Yeah,
octave.
and just like music, like certain notes play nicely together, and then others really don't. And it'd just be
Right,
that creates either the harmony or the dissonance of
right.
not everything plays nicely together.
Is it a major scale or a minor scale? That one little, you know what I mean?
Right.
Well, the whole point is if we hit the right one, and we can put that inside that scalar field that's in there, inside that static and scalar field that's just run on top of the other, right? All the way up. And we have it vortexing. Now, is it going to give me that crystal finally lighting up? See, that's all I want.
That's
I'm
hard to say, though.
I'm looking
Is
for
it in
that
it?
one thing. Because then once you do that, the amount of energy that's in that sucker, you can just put things in the water and it'll light up. You know what I mean?
You
Well,
might, you
Gotta
might
start
be
the
able to.
reaction.
what
You
about that?
might be
What
able
about
to
that
get an
experiment?
idea.
Sorry.
Can I say you might be able to get an idea of the frequencies with the Rife frequencies? Those type of like small cellular structures will be along the lines of a big crystal structure. So if you can find something similar like Rife did, um, even if it's a subharmonic in a lower frequency, you could do it, but it's not going to. I would suspect that the crystal lattice level is going to be like in the gigahertz kind of thing. That's going to be
It'll be high.
really hard to. Yeah. So you would need a subharmonic of that, but you can still do it. Yeah. But maybe just use a variable inductor, like, we were talking about, just like coat hangers, and vary the inductance. That's easier than the capacitance.
You see,
Now, I don't
I
know
have
if
a
this would
feeling it's
work.
in the low It's in the low hertz. I don't think
It
it's
could,
in the
I
high.
mean, anything connected to the low hertz is going to be connected to the high hertz, but the
No,
lattice,
I understand. I'm just
yeah,
saying I think it
you're right.
vibrates with the earth in the low hertz.
Gotcha.
That's why we don't
Yeah,
see
yeah.
it.
I
Go
All
get
ahead,
right.
you.
Joe.
Yeah.
So here's an idea, and it's an unusual one, but it's tying a couple of ideas together. All right. You ever see when they hook the probes up to like organic material, and then they hook it through a synthesizer,
Okay.
and then it actually picks up on the frequencies that are being generated by the organic, and then creates it into an audible sound based on its frequency and input. I've shared this with you when they plugged it into like a mushroom, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
and the mushrooms start playing like alien music
Yeah.
because it's hooked up through a synthesizer, right? So that could be a method of measure, first off of what something's doing, in an identifiable way to know what key it's in and know what note it's hitting, and or because it could be multiple, as you know from plugging it into the mushroom, right? If it's multiple and it changes, to then have that directly, if you had some kind of software to do it, or something to bridge the gap between point A and point B, you could actually hook it directly up to your system, to where your system is actually running the same exact tune right through it simultaneously as it's being picked up from the material itself.
Mm.
So I don't. Again, I said it was far fetched. It's right off the top of my head, as it always is. But it's one thing that I'm kind of drawing an analog to. There.
Maybe just start just with the like a higher power Schumann resonance and see what happens. Just to see, because like you said, if that's the underlying frequency anyways from the earth, maybe
Well,
that's just
what I
maybe it's
thought
just
was
harmonics.
I'm going to take a sample of the same rock, of the same quartz that I'm going to use, right? I'm going to bash it up, and I'm going to put it in a cap, and I'm going to put holes in there, and I'm going to set it in water. Then I'm going to take my oscilloscope and put the probe in there and hit scan. and I'm going to look to see if there's anything that peaks, even if it's a little bit. If it's more than the rest, I want to see what it is. If I can find any peaks, that's where I'm going to start.
So John
I didn't know
Bigman, by the way, hit what I had going through my head as soon as you mentioned Schumann's resonance is that that the draw might be a little too much is the biggest understatement ever made in all of humanity. It's that's exactly what pumped through my head on that is, we always talk about Schumann's resonance, but actually, going with that and real time based on a locality could be kind of dangerous. Saying
It could, if you're a little bit off or have a beat frequency, it could. I
Yeah.
agree.
Ooh, Gerald did an experiment with his coil at Schumann resonance, and it had different things with the magnet. Whether when he did it out of it, no magnetic field. When he did it with it, it picked up the field of the magnet, or it started vibrating the material itself. So,
And it had different orbital patterns.
yeah. So we should try that. 7.85 is what it is, right?
go for it.
Yeah, around I think 7.8. I mean, I can look at 7.86 is what I'd say.
7.83.
Oh,
There you go. I wasn't that far off.
Yeah, well, if I feel it, if I feel it in the mountains in New York, I know it works.
see, that's why I
smoke signals with it.
I didn't know you had a frequency scanner like that. You can actually sweep the
Oh
frequency.
yeah. Check the frequency, and then I have a frequency generator as well, so I can turn it on and put it at the exact same frequency. And it goes at a certain amount of volts. Yeah, we could just put it in there at low voltage and see what it does.
Yeah, that's what you need right there. That's really cool.
And then we could then we could just, because it runs like a beat frequency on top of your circuit, we could just run it in there on top of what the circuit's doing, so it overrides it. It's no different than putting frequency onto your DC flyback. You could do the same with this, and it's just boom, just hit the dial, put it in, you're good to go.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. Crystal, like I said, material science. I honestly think that's the breakthrough that's going to be next for our technology. And
why do you think I want it? If we could get there's so many implications with crystals. You know what I mean? What it does to your mind. You know what I mean? The whole control between there, the energy source it creates. Those things are just awesome in itself. And if we can get it to light up, it's biblical too. I mean, you start talking about the Ark of the Covenant, man, and you got this thing lighting up, those different crystals. You got something special. So,
there was one thing that David Rossi said in that interview recently that I simultaneously agreed and disagreed with at the same time, and it kind of drove me nuts because it became an internal conflict with myself.
Okay.
And that was he said that it material science is definitely important, but it's not like key to anything. And I agreed with that wholeheartedly, but I just know that the material science end of things is what brings it to that next level, like you're saying. It's when you could actually have something solid state that's doing what you need it to do. And it could become a singular task at that point, as opposed to hackable or whatever.
The be all end all, nothing's,
right.
But
so it's like I agreed and disagreed with it simultaneously, because I was like, yeah, common materials could definitely be used for all this sort of stuff, because it really has to do with their electromagnetic properties, more than anything. And we already have things that fall in all the corners, right? But it's bringing these things together into some kind of equilibrium. That's going to make this next step. It's going to be the equivalent of the transistor, and then the equivalent of the silicon chip. Right now it's not at that stage because it's on a very macro scale. Once you can bring it down into into a homogeneous type of thing, then that's where it's going to be at, and that's only going to come through material science at the molecular level.
Oh, I agree with that, but I think his point, and the way I took it, was simply make it out of the regular materials and make sure it works. Then trade each one out with something that's a better value and see if it still works. That's kind of how I took it. Is build out a common material. I mean, we were talking earlier a couple of days ago, Joe, about aluminum and bismuth and swapping them. What would it do? You know what I mean? Because there's certain properties of bismuth which would be great, but it still has a lot of the aluminum properties, but it also has lead properties. So you're looking at, something that could be so much better for the whole thing. So, but I agree, do it as a normal material. See if you can get a reaction, then track down that reaction and which one it is and where you can amplify that reaction only.
It's something that we already know. Sorry.
I was saying, clay ceramics, and Joe's been big about ceramics, and the iron oxide is magnetic, and then you got sand, and the earth is full of clay and sand, and you start there. You got your magnetics, and you got your dielectric, and the earth is just a huge example of where we need to, the holistic picture, if you will. Go ahead, Joe.
Dead on, and it's perfect you said that, because this builds right on that. Is the same as Nathan, you had showed us all the layering of the layering of the fields, right, the other day, different layers and everything like that. And then we know through all the different cells and stuff that we look at that the layering of all these different materials are important. In the same, at the same token, all the layering at the molecular level could, where it's not even discernible necessarily, as more of a homogeneous structure, could be the ultimate kind of goal. And that would be, the meta material, so to speak, that brings it to the next level, is once you could achieve that degree of layering of different materials, having them work, homogenously with each other.
That's basically a solar cell, but if it's above 20%, it's classified. So
yeah, we've talked about that. But that's also basically an organite setup as well.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's the earth. That's how the earth does it too, right? We have layer. You dig down, it's organic. You dig down further, it's sand and it's silica. Dig down further, it's bigger rocks. Keep on going, you get clay, which is just a finer form of the silica, and then you start running into decomposition of matter is thrown up in between it. It's all just layer. And the depth of it is depending on the layer you're in. So Earth is doing it too naturally through its own processes.
Remember when I hit on this point a little while back, saying the sun, it doesn't have much iron or cobalt or nickel or anything like that. It's pretty much mostly hydrogen and helium, and it's a spinning ball, and it produces a humongous magnetic field that travels beyond the Oort cloud. You know what I mean? Probably connecting to the next star. It's got the biggest magnetic field, but yet virtually no magnetic material. That's what I'm trying to get at, where it's more important to study the motion of electric charges than it is magnetism, because magnetism is a side effect.
Well, that goes in tune with what Nathan and I had talked about so many times when we're talking about energy densities and matter densities and proximity to one another. In order for these materials, no matter what their magnetic properties are, the magnetic field, a common sense thing would be, well, if there's a magnetic field in something that's magnetic, then there would be a form of attraction, right? But at the same token, when you're dealing with matter and energy in relation to one another, it's only in the states of equilibrium that those attractive forces really occur, because matter would prefer to be with matter in higher density concentrations. It's just sort of how it goes.
Gotcha.
Well, is it magnetics without the magnetic feature, though? So when you go in space, they're not getting, magnetized out there. So it has to be diamagnetic or something else, some other form of magnetism.
Well, it's radiation until it's in proximity to matter. Then it's magnet.
Well, then the space station would come down because it'd be magnetized, right?
Well,
It can't
it's
be
funny
anything like
that the comets, like the asteroid belts, are a lot of magnetic material. Iron and nickel and cobalt are in that. So it's funny that that's on the dielectric plane of the sun. You get me? The most magnetic materials. You get what I'm saying here? And then the Oort clouds also, you know, a lot of water is diamagnetic, but mostly the asteroid belt is magnetic materials, and it's circling the dielectric plane.
There you go. So it's pushing it out.
It's something to think about.
Yep. It ties right in with things we've talked about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Ties right back into the bismuth conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
That
think the
business
crystals...
I think it's going to be wicked. I don't think it's the crystals. Like, I'm going to pound that sucker out to a real thin plate and put it on there. And that's just what I'm going to do. I'm going to, you know what I mean? Hopefully it's malleable, and I don't know that it is. But I'm hoping
brittle.
I think it's brittle.
Well, then that's going to suck. So we're
yeah, and on top of that, I think that you're underplaying the significance of the crystal structure, which is something that we talked about a long time ago. The crystal structure of it's important.
It could be.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, no, so it has its own properties, but but a solid block of bismuth doesn't have the same properties necessarily as a crystallized.
well, it's going to have to
bismuth.
form in a very small cavity. That's the point. So
You could alloy it.
I've seen people alloy it.
But then you don't get the crystals, right?
No,
You know
you still get
said?
crystals with the right proportion, but it wouldn't be the cubic structure crystals that you see with the
See, I wanted to just create the cavity in the aluminum and pour it in and let it create whatever it's going to create. And
well, you could do that. You could do that, but you would have to kind of swish it around and dump it, and after a certain amount of time to allow for that surface level crystal formation to occur.
Yeah, it's really the cooling rate that forms the crystals is the cooling rate mostly.
Right.
Well, we could run it on a I want to say like you're running a barrel and just keep rotating it. If that's what you need to do, we can add heat in there, right down the center of it. You know what I mean? To continuously heat it just a little bit for warmer. We could put warmer pads on it so that it stays warm. You know what I mean? Like an electric.
But that might actually.
Blanket.
I mean, it's not that that's a bad idea, but that may impact the crystallization of it as well. Because I think that the whole principle behind it, because the solid material is going to have one crystal structure, okay, but it builds out in a certain pattern, and once if it completely solidifies into a solid block, does not have the same properties as if that reaction is cut short. So when you cut that reaction short, it has an incomplete chain, and that's what that incomplete chain. I believe, at least, is probably what gives it some of its characteristics. I mean, I could be somewhat wrong, but I've seen people try to plate bismuth to other things, which, by the way, doesn't work all too well. Okay, and like they weren't getting any sort of, diamagnetic properties.
But see, I think you rotate the aluminum at a certain speed, it'll give you the frequency inside of it already. It automatically puts the frequency of the rotation in there. So that's what I'm looking for. And then
give it a shot.
If it has some crystal structure in there, it might work better or not work. Or, I mean, at this point, what do we got to lose? I mean,
nothing.
It's going to be a lot of trial and error. I mean, never have I ever made an experiment where it worked out the first time exactly how I planned it to.
Yeah, and that stuff is so finicky that it's going to be trial and error. But the good news is that it's easy to remelt and just try again. So
yeah, it should be. I think a thin layer of like melt and smear kind of tactic. I don't know. That might be the easiest. Like a sponge, maybe melt it and like dab it and like heat gun and sponge it off.
I don't know what
the outside sphere here.
It looks great.
Yeah, maybe you could just like heat it like with a heat gun and keep it hot and like take a sponge and like spackle it.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. I don't think it has adhesion properties though, and you probably have to etch whatever surface you're trying that to hope that it mechanically bonds.
But with plastic, you could triboelectrically charge it to the opposite charge of what bismuth would be on the triboelectric series, and
Oh,
it should
so basically like powder coating it.
rub it down, and then melt it and then spackle it.
Okay.
So I was going to ask you, dielectric in the form of a gel, like a solid gel, kind of like the Shoals shoe things that you put in. You know what I mean? Do you can you make that?
Yeah. Soul gel methods with the like aerogel that Joe was talking about a couple or few
Yeah,
previously.
a couple weeks ago. It all melts together, but yeah, we were talking about some aerogels.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm only asking because I can create the energy and make a mold. You know what I mean? I found spheres online that are aluminum, and I can get one. You know what I mean? And then put it over top and put plastic around it as the container of it, and charge the living daylights out of it.
Well, I guess I'll discuss something that me and Sean were talking about. I don't know if I should, but I'm an open person. I don't like to keep things secret, but if you do use like a spray and you use the right kind of nozzle and you use the right type of aggregate, that's basically, a quantum dot type of insulative material in the paint, just it traveling through the nozzle will give it the friction. And if you triboelectrically charge it first, then you can basically Sean was saying like a paint car or like what you would use for a car to paint it.
Right. I was talking about Sean with this earlier too. Right. Yeah. Ionize it of opposite charges so it attracts, like the same concept as powder coating something.
Powder coating. There you go.
Yes. And he was saying, even just without my triboelectric kind of idea of it coming out of the nozzle of the opposite series, even just adding a high voltage is what he's saying at the nozzle of the spray. So the combined effect of it coming out of the nozzle and triboelectrically charging to what you rub in the surface of, say, and a high voltage being applied to it, it should be a good first coating to get a charge on it.
Interesting.
But that method would take several layers, like a tree trunk, right? You're going to have like light bands and brown bands and light bands and brown bands and light bands. Like, so to get the higher charge, you're going to want to spray and then spray like with the lacquer, spray again, spray with a lacquer.
See, that's kind of the whole point of the spheres themselves. It's one charge to the next charge to the next. You get what I'm saying?
But I thought of something that would be better, because it's claiming 10 to the 8th power volts per meter, which is humongous, but I don't want to disclose it at this point. But what Sean was saying, it would be a relatively easy way if you replace the nozzle and you know what the charge is going to be coming out of the nozzle, you'll get that triboelectric cling to start with. So, you can start that way, because the 3D print material is going to be more plastic, but you could spray it with like a nickel coating or a graphite coating to get it more conductive and charge the outside while you're spraying it, and that'd be even better.
Yeah, and that's how they actually electroplate plastics and stuff like that, is the same exact idea. It's graphite coating it or whatever, so you can get it to so.
And the more layers you get, the more charge density you're going to get. Just like a tree trunk, how it's like, it grows out and rings.
I mean, and if you're using a automotive spray gun where like you can mix your own paint and stuff like that too. If you could paint like a white enamel, for instance, and dump in shit tons of extra like titanium oxide that you just buy online, and that'll raise your,
great.
That'll raise your K value up even further, because the white pigmentation in paint is titanium oxide that has a massive K value in the first place, but the density of it's fairly low. So to get it to adhere, and have it at a higher level, you just have to buy and add more titanium oxide to white enamel paint,
Right.
And then if you charge it, like he said, then you would get the even layers too.
And
So
titanium oxide tends to be positive, so you would want a nozzle material like Teflon, so that as it's ejected out of the nozzle, it's actually gaining just an extra charge from escaping the nozzle itself.
yeah, and the Teflon would have the dual purpose of reducing the clog factor of doping already high pigmented paint. So
Right.
you get a 2-for-1 on that job.
Yep, I agree. Very nice, Joe.
Wow.
Told you I'm a dope.
Dude, you're a philosopher, man. I love it.
I've actually painted my Nova before. I painted the whole thing orange, man. It looked gorgeous.
Oh wow.
I'd
be afraid. I would think like spray painting, I would make like a blotch and just fuck it all up. Like,
No, man, did all the body work, got it straightened out, did all the metal work on it, got it beautifully straight. Did the primer,
awesome,
you know what I mean? The base, the clear, all of it.
That's so
cool.
But
that type of painting, it is intimidating at first until you realize how forgiving painting actually is, provided that you've prepped properly.
Oh, prepped all of it.
Right. As long as you prepped and you taped everything off and everything's good in that regard, painting stuff is super forgiving. You get that drip, you sand that drip right out, It's just kind of how it goes. And, it comes with the territory. You just got to be brave about it.
So when it drips, you just sand it real quick?
Yeah, well, you wait till it all dries. You sand it down, a little bit. Sandpaper helps. But then you recoat everything after that. And then it blends perfectly.
Did you
never want to sand it and then clear it.
And if you're really going for gold when you're doing something like that, like chances of you getting that perfectly correct orange peel is just like, you have to have like really good skills for that. So chances are you're gonna just end up going up over it anyway with like high grit sandpaper, getting it to be near flawless, and then sealing it off with your clear. That way it just looks like, it's better than the day it rolled out of the factory for sure. Because GM wasn't taking all that time and effort to put it in. That Nova definitely came with a single stage.
Let me tell you what. You get a lot of coats of clear on there, and then you call somebody up who does it for a living to get that last bit of shine out of it. You know what I mean? To do the wet sanding.
Yeah.
That part is the worst part.
Oh yeah, because it's so easy to, like, when you're trying to cut a clear coat, it's so easy just to blow through the clear coat, and then you're back to square one for at least a nice big section to you got to feather it out, and then you got to say, please, I've been down that road before.
Yeah, it's worth all the money that you pay him.
Yeah,
or her, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, at least
we did away with the DEI, bro.
You would.
I would what the dude coming to buff your truck out or car out,
You always hope for the opposite. You know what I mean? Give me the good looking one to buff it out.
Yeah, fair enough.
It never works out that way.
No.
I would say start there though, like Joe's saying, like take the sphere and use the conductive spray and put a high charge on it, and then what was it? Titanium oxide, white paint, basically, would be great with the Teflon nozzle, and it will acquire a positive charge. So you want to charge that other sphere negative with the conductive paint, and that would be an easy way to start. Yeah. Because making a fabric or something is going to have to come down to manufacturing stage where we're just not at. I can visualize how to do, like, like you're saying, like to encapsulate it with a fabric.
Oh, no. I was full on going to inject it into there and then rotate it with the electricity going through it at all times. And that way it stays until it dries. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That could go.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't wait. Gravity well.
Yeah. He gets the message from me every day. I'm like, the next thing, gravity well.
Yeah. But it's going to start out small and kind of like some of the strangest tests. It's going to be the magnets. It's going to be, I want to try aluminum tape on it. And it's just because when I ran my Tesla coil with this, You know what I mean? It lit it up like all day. So, and then I want to make sure that each top part does not get put any tape on so that it can go out like a gas and go through the next layer. You know what I mean? On each one of them, and then build out to the outside. And I need to see if it gets an extra charge on that outside, because eventually we got to be able to see a field on this thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's the goal. I need little army men to stick to the outside, you know, little pebbles. You know, if I could build a little lake on there. So
yeah.
Well, I think that
it-
when you have like even just those static generators, you know, the ones that's all they do, you put your hand on it and it's like that whole deal. I'm pretty sure
Like
if you
a
get those
Vandergraaf.
things cooking enough, like you could get that same sort of test to probably work even just with that. So I think what
Mhm.
you're doing, like, I just don't know what the RPM would have to look like in order for it to occur at that scale, because like Jarvis was talking about earlier, you know, the outside diameter of this thing is relevant to the ultimate speed, right? So you know that the outside is going to be spinning a lot faster than the inside.
So
You know,
let me just tell you, on my gravity fire experiment, 1200 to 1400 RPM is a perfect number to build the fields. Just
Okay.
so we're aware, it doesn't have to be super high at first. They could be really, really light, because you don't want to sling it out across the room. You want it to build in a bubble, and you want it to stay in that bubble.
But the only thing is that with the Graviflyer, you have an input that power that, you know, a certain frequency that you're putting into the thing, you know, and everything, right? Now with this, because you're dealing with solid state magnets, you know, it's your RPM is gonna have to be in tune
Dependent upon the
with
diameter.
the power and output of those magnets. So
Because
you
like
know,
he's
there's
saying, the outer one's going to be relatively faster just because it's a higher diameter. You
it's
know,
right,
so
it's going to be faster. So you know,
Well-
if you're looking for equilibrium in the spin, in the rotational spin, your inner is going to have to be at a different RPM than your outer,
but you
proportionally
may
to
not
the.
it's
need
not built that way. It's built to be
you may not need that though.
You may
it-
not.
You,
Okay,
they're
I'm just
they're
throwing a
locked in
variable
on
in.
each side. They're locked
Yeah,
in on
yeah.
each side. It can't
That's a good
change different
point.
RPMs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point, but I don't know. I keep thinking of the contact thing where, you know, it's not even just all of them spinning in one, but you got one going this way, one going this way, like the XYZ axis, you know.
Oh, it would be nice to build one of those. Yes,
Wouldn't
I
that
would
be
love
cool?
to. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
it's that third
I think
axis
that'd be
that's the
this
tiger.
is just
like a
basically-
gyroscope of every axis, like the contact, and just see if they're hinting at something, like a wormhole type of travel there.
Nathan just sitting in his garage making virtual atoms, bro.
He's gonna teleport, man.
let me tell you something. If this thing hits at the right frequency and you put the aluminum in there in the bismuth, I wouldn't be surprised to see a plasmoid. I just wouldn't.
No, I mean it could very well happen.
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
I think starting out small is a good thing, because I could tell you firsthand, running this stuff on that gravity fire, it's not so much the things that you're thinking of now. It's not the magnets. It's not the RPM. It's simply how much static charge does it have, and then where does the actual charge from that Tesla coil go? That gas-like feature of it, where does it go? Because if you're building levels as a capacitor with this thing, and you can get it to hold in each state, that thing is going to amplify so much harder than it normally does. So let's put it this way. You can tell where it is in the room when you turn the thing on, and you can tell where it's holding it in, and you can tell when it goes out of it. So that thing on 1200 RPMs, if it's just static going in there, will take out your computer in a second.
Yeah.
It will literally take it out. So that field's got to build out to the outside. So you have to run it at like 300 RPM just to make sure that field gets to the outside. Then you build
When
it
you
up
start
slowly.
putting static in motion, that's where things usually get classified. That's where
It gets classified when you have a spark on it.
Well,
You start to
I'm
see
not gonna
things you're not supposed to see.
some things I shouldn't say, but when you start spinning static, you're it's just you're on if your
So-
goals for gravity.
All right, so it plays off of this and what I said before. I troubleshot while you were saying that. I troubleshot what I said about the RPM differential in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I ran an analog in my head about the thunderstorm generator and how it utilizes the same, proportional difference, but in the context of a closed system where the compression of the vacuum that's continuously alternating is equal, but the size differential of the pressure is made up of the difference. So the higher pressure differential makes up for the difference between the spin rate difference, and that's how it holds the equilibrium. Okay.
If I could say one thing, I
Yeah.
see where you're going with that. Have you ever seen the John Searle generator?
No.
No, in action, it's actually different speeds between the outside and inside. If you, so I would try to match those speeds as a prototype.
The hard thing is you got to remember you got two spheres connected to the same shaft. So and then
mechanically, it's going to be difficult to have to match different.
Yeah, they won't. They're going to be the same speed.
Mechanically, it's not a difficult endeavor because all you would have to have is a pipe and a pipe with a bearing and two different drives.
But do you need to
have counter-rotational?
Or you could set it to gearing.
Gearing too, sure.
But that's not in the first stage. That's not
it's not the first stage. But you know me, I like to jump ahead.
So far away from
I
that.
see. If you see the Searle thing in action, though, I think the outside is actually slower than the inside. It's counterintuitive. You would think that the outside would be needing to go faster than the inside magnets, but on the Searle effect generator, the outside magnets I think are actually traveling slower than the inside magnets.
Right, but if they're opposing charges that are created, and they're counter-rotational, there's going to be compression and torsion on the lines of interaction. So it's going to kind of hold itself in. It's going to be in a state of, like we always talk about, a state of cavitation, right? So it's going to be in a state of expansion and contraction in a beat rhythm.
Yeah, that's down the line though. Like Nathan's saying, like
I mean, I'm not saying off of a preliminary. I'm talking about the whole system and what it ultimately would look to achieve. Like like that's kind of what you're looking for.
Let me tell you. I'm gonna tell you my first thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna throw some dryer sheets at it, some paper, and I'll throw my socks at it.
The dryer sheet's funny.
I need anything that'll stick to it, man.
That is funny.
Let me tell you what. I ran it on my gravity flyer and I ran the dryer sheet, right? So what started to happen is I can make the time that it took to multiply that static field in my room. I can cut it down to like a minute or two instead of 10 to 15 minutes. Okay. Just like that, just by knowing where to put it. And immediately it started picking up a ton of energy because it gets on there and it stays on there. And then it multiplies the energy coming out and it sprays everywhere. Okay. So yeah, you could light up your room quick. You could get that thing to spark over like crazy. Like the interaction between those two fields, by the way, is a very good spark. So there may be some lightning going on in there as we run it.
Yeah, it may be.
That like interaction.
The Lorentz force of, like I said, when you start spinning highly charged things, it's a different world. That's where
it'd be interesting to see this made out of acrylic. Because then you'd know.
Yeah. Could try that. See, I think somebody said Van de Graaff. The problem with Van de Graaffs is there's too much static electricity too fast. You literally
always remember is like, are you going to put the Van de Graaff in the machine, and then you have to make the spheres big enough to include that. Whenever you have an electric spinning, you don't need an external power source like a Van de Graaff. It's just all I'm going to say.
that makes wiring easy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just provides it like a magnet. So.
What people don't understand, if you understood Hutchinson, in order to have that Van de Graaff to work, in order to hold that amount of energy in, the Tesla coil you have to build, 400 DC volts would be on the small scale in order to hold that in, and you'd have to use hot energy to do it. We're going to use cold energy in order to produce the field. So therefore, you bring down the amount of energy, and it'll pick up because of the cavitation as it goes and build out each capacitor. So that's why we were asking earlier. I mean, if you get one capacitor, can we leak to the next one a little bit and to the next one, and can we get a higher density state on the last field out? You know what I mean? Because that's what I'm looking for, is that thick field where you can visually see it. I can look through some kind of red device and see it. You know what I mean? Anything. I can get a red light bulb, blue light bulb, something that I can see some kind of field camera blur. You know what I mean? Anything just to see it, just to see it on the outside so we can have a proof of concept.
Yeah, I see. I know exactly what you're saying. And I mean, it's just a matter of pushing it out and having just enough force to pull it back in before it goes into a diffuse state.
See, I got,
as long as you have a net gain on that, internal holding it in force, like, from the middle out. Then you should have an ever increasing density level external.
I could help you calculate that with Lorentz forces where you want to go with that.
I think we'll have to put the numbers for you then and see, because
I could help you with that.
I got this camera so that I can specifically blur things with the lens. See, I need to be able to see it. I saw Lexi do it with a red light and shifting his lens, and he's able to see the field. So my goal is, can I do the same? If I could do the same, man, it's $1 million answer right there. It's like, you know what I mean? I'll have the gravity well I've been trying to build for the last 5 years. So
you're talking about Alexei's little tiny red LED that he just always had like tucked off to the side, huh?
Well, he had like a red bulb, and it covered the whole room, and then he took his camera in regular and then blurred it a little bit, and it showed the field perfectly. Now, I mean, how many people want to see this field? If he can see it and he can do it, and he's in his house, you know what I mean, with this big helmet that he wears, God, I should be able to do it. You know what I mean? He didn't fake that. Not at all.
He wore a helmet.
Saw that field. Oh, I
would wear a helmet.
He didn't want to be known.
He showed his face. He wore that helmet. I'm thinking, you need one for your balls, dude. Because
oh my God, really?
That's what I'd be protecting. Like, I'd be putting some tinfoil chonies on.
It could fry something. I don't know. I mean, it's a good precaution, I guess. You never know. What if you turn it up and you just like become a zombie and like, oh, whoa.
Listen, anything's possible. I mean, I hate to say it, especially with this type of energy. You never know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we can't go far into it, but there's an insurance billing code that has to do with exotic propulsion, effects, and I think that's worth knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing, huh?
Yep. Biohacking yourself without CRISPR.
Oh man.
When we get to the day that our body is our holy temple, I think that's a big secret. If aliens really are envious of us, maybe that's the big secret, to where we don't need any of this external technology if we can master our own bodies. But that's way out there. You know what I mean? That's the woo.
I sent Nathan a live that some guy was doing today about a CIA document declassified that he pulled off of the vault, and it was about some kind of UFO incident over Siberia where the craft was shot down with a missile, and then the Soviets like tried to do like an interception on it and stuff like that, and saying that there were 3 entities that came out, and they were like humanoid type etheric entities that then consolidated themselves into one sphere, and then basically decimated all the Soviet artillery and stuff that was closing in on this thing. And then evidently there was like the declassified documents were like, I don't know, however many pages, 20 pages or something like that, of a 250-page document. And within what was declassified, it alluded to the remainder of the pages and what was kind of in there, and all sorts of evidence and crap. I mean, listen, I'm not saying I believe or don't believe. Like, I'm not saying any of that. Like, that's not neither here nor there. But what's interesting about that is, they're saying that there were, in a declassified report, they're saying that there were 3 entities that combined into one. Then they were energy.
This is why I wanted to make my Ankh one. I call it. Like Sean was working on his Uber one. This is actually a meter. I have a green light for ground and blue light for sky, because I picture the sky as a positive potential and the ground as negative. And it doesn't need a power source. It's powered by my body capacitance, and I can just touch things and tell if it's a positive or negative charge with this. I call it Ankh. It looks like an Ankh. I thought Nathan would like it because
it does look like an Ankh. Yeah,
it does.
And the lights are on the 2 sides, the blue and green.
Put a mirror in the center and look at it, and you'll see what they saw. You're right.
But I like that it doesn't need a power source.
That's a nifty party trick.
No, I have a gravity meter or whatever they call it that Alexi had. Charlie C built me one. It has 2 lights on it that'll come on when you have both fields, so you can detect the static field with it. And you can detect the actual radiant field with it.
That's basically
and
what this
it has 0 batteries in it.
Yeah, it's a glorified. Yeah, it's basically an AV plug when you get down to it.
Yeah, basically, but it works perfect. It detects both fields with no problem.
And no power input. That's what
no power input, because you're picking up the power into it as the antenna.
You're powering it. That's why I'm saying, like, maybe that's the next. I know material science, but the end goal maybe is just realizing that all the power is within ourselves. Like, just sitting here is 100 watts that we're putting out. That's pretty amazing. And knowing that you can augment the power, with the boost bell and stuff that we've been mentioning, like, you can do a lot with 100 watts just being put out by just sitting here.
I think they made a watch that you could put on and it would run all the time based on your body.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know they got stuff like that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So check this out. I was talking to Nathan just the other day, in brief, about how shockingly similar my own meditative process is, to exactly everything that we talk about all the time, right? And I was saying it goes into resonant tuning and the building of the fields and the equalization of your chakras and the flow of energy, in a toroidal fashion, and being able to consolidate and build this energy enough, to charge yourself and then ultimately be able to come into resonance with the ambient environment that you created. So
I thought of a cheat way.
Right.
Sometimes it can take like 10 years to be a monk in that type of, like, and I've seen DJ. Have you seen that Qigong master where he can light LEDs and like shock bodies and stuff? And Mel Gibson actually talked
I've seen stuff like that before. I don't know that specific,
like
but
the real deal. Like Mel Gibson actually, like but there are like very minute, like Qigong, I believe is really something that's really into that Jedi stuff. But I thought of a cheat way where you can like just take aluminum foil and lay it out on the ground and ground it and do workouts on top of that. And as you're doing that, you're building your body capacitance, especially if you take the right minerals before you work out on that mat. You know, every time you stand up, your potential is from your head to your toes, and you can get like ferro rods, they call them, where you can shake them and get your body potential up. The ferro rods would help with that. So you could build your ki artificially without having to do meditation. And that's kind of the Jedi way, I'd say, you know, because it does take a lot of patience with the I have ADD, so it's hard for me to meditate. I'm just trying to cheat and like use ground capacitors and, you know,
Well, there's
to
that
the advantage.
House of Tarot guy, you know, who works in that field apparently, you know, of devices that assist with just that. And apparently, like, you know, he knows of a whole bunch of stuff. And I don't really know the particulars of it enough to talk about it intelligently, I guess. But, you know, he had said multiple times that there's definitely things out there that are effective in accelerating the process and so on. I mean, I've said it time and time again, and I don't use it continuously anymore so much, but like whole gateway process and binaural beats and you know
I would be interested in trying that.
now
Binaural beat.
that I'm telling you right now is highly effective because I've been meditating for years and you know it reaches or reached a point for me where it was very plateaued at just a very relaxed state where like I could zero out and that's where I pretty much plateaued.
Would you be
Once
willing, once we have electrodes, would you be willing to try to one like a bendy like the Indians do on your third chakra, your eye
I
chakra?
have
Like,
tried that before with various minerals and stuff that I have, but if you're saying an electric, that's cool.
yeah, an electorate, and then you know, like the ferro rods. I think that's good for potential too because they used to shake them. If you look up ferro rods, I think that's what they're doing there.
I actually
And
have right here, like you know, this isn't my strange rock that brought me on here in the first place, but this I found right along with it, and it too is strange, right? And it's one
oh
little
wow,
plug that I pulled out. It's very, very strange stuff. In fact, I could feel it in my fingers right now.
cool.
Okay. Now,
Yeah,
I've thrown that on my forehead during meditation, and I swear to God, you could feel the draw. It's an inward draw right from it.
wow,
Very powerful
yeah,
stuff, man. Very,
yeah.
very powerful stuff.
Why not use technology to our advantage to like instead of meditate? I believe meditation is key too, but if we could make it faster through using electrics and things to concentrate the energy where we want, you know, I think we can kind of become a black belt like quicker. You know what I mean?
For sure. There's definitely a lot of keys to being able to you know achieve the higher consciousness levels and stuff. But the only I didn't want to go totally out in left field about it, but I think that the point that I was bringing through is that resonant tuning, you know, getting your breathing in tune with all the flow of energy in your body, making
Yeah.
sure that the flow is in the correct way, that you're bringing it in through the top, out through the bottom, and then it's cycling back through while you have a continuous input.
The
You know,
the
and then
stillness is the most difficult thing for me. Is the stillness that you talk about? It's so
so
hard for me.
so the binaural beat stuff helps you overcome that though because it hacks your brain into you know being able to achieve states that really you only get during sleep, but you want it during a conscious state. So that's where the binaural beats come in and really help.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Ralph Reed talked
Do you-
about that when Otis D. Carr's UFO. That,
Mm.
that it worked based on the frequencies that are coming out of your brain with the crystalline structure that was in it.
Would you be my guinea pig with some electric candles, Joe?
absolutely. We could always talk. And if you want me to put you on to you know the stuff that I help too, I would
Mhm.
I would bet that with any sort of like even loose commitment to it that you'd find that however far you had ever gotten meditating before, that you'd get much further, much faster this way. And once you achieve a certain point, like, you don't have that anxiety of not being able to, um,
Mm.
get there. Yeah.
Cool, man. I'm
Yeah.
excited. This group, everybody's got their niche that just all is just so sympathetic. Like we all work together so well, I think.
Kind of
sure.
the point, though, isn't it? Everybody
Right.
got their own thing, but we all bring it together.
I was hoping to see somebody new, because you had the invitation. I was like, yeah, I want to see somebody. But I was like, if nobody's going to step up to the plate,
Well,
I'll try to.
I got
Joe,
two people
thank
that
you.
I got two people that like to come on. It's just people sometimes think that they need like the perfect camera, the perfect mic, or something like that, and you don't.
Right.
All you need to do is just, you show up, you have a mic. We don't need to see your face every time if you don't want to show it. That's always cool. We can always pre-record it. We can go through the YouTube channel, whatever you put up there. We can present it. If you have a presentation, we can do that too. Always work, man. It starts with just saying hi on the email, and then we lay it out based on what you're comfortable with. And who do you want to be there with you? You know what I mean? Things like that. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you go like, okay, I'm really into this. So sometimes Joe is best to talk to all the time about it, or you're into this.
Right.
And,
if you want to
that's what I
jive with
like to do.
Jarvis, if you want to jive with Jarvis, let Nathan know and we'll jive, man. So just like
and
Joe, I asked Nathan if Joe could come on, and I appreciate you coming on with me.
Oh yeah, man. I'm glad you had me, and I try to make myself as available as I can too. And and I think that what Nathan said before, though, for everybody that might be interested, the whole pre-recorded thing. I know that I've talked to a few people, that I was like, hey, you should really come on and say your piece, because really interesting stuff and whatnot. And it's been expressed to me like those same types of anxieties and stuff, about, well, I've never really gotten in front of people live before. And maybe that's even in the back of your head. The pre-recording and whatnot kind of takes that element of it away. And if something needed to be edited, or if there's a hesitation in sort of like a response or something like that, you don't have to worry about it anymore. So let that be a buffer and welcome invitation for people, because really there's no reason to be scared of getting up here and talking about it. We do it all the time.
Yeah, we're here to help everybody. And like Nathan said, even if you want to put your camera off and just chill, that's what this whole group's about, is just making everyone better, and everybody's got some little input that we can all help each other with.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, the people in the chat probably come in and school me all day, teach me all kinds of new stuff.
Chat's crazy smart, man.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Yep. And even if you just want to come on and challenge stuff that we talked about.
Yeah, there should be like a challenge day, but I don't know. Like, what if you disagree? Like, let's go. Like, let's get them in the match, and whoever they want.
You know what? All I say is just you have to be respectful for the.
I know. I'm
respectful for everybody on here. You can't say these guys are morons and all that.
I was going with Bernie. Bernie's wanting a match with somebody. I'm like, yeah, cage match.
He's gonna pull out the pineapple on you. You watch out.
Well, right. That's the point. Is like, if you have if you don't agree and you have a bit to say, get on and say it. And I think it's a welcoming environment for that. It's like, but sitting there being like, this is wrong in the chat, like, well, I don't know what people do half the time with that, but okay, they do it. It's fine.
Yeah.
John says he talks too much. Yeah, so do I.
I think we all
I get it. I think I've gotten better, even though I've only cut off Jarvis like 6 or 7 times today.
Yeah,
I cut you off too. It's all good.
That's how I talk, though. So it's like, I expect to be interrupted the same as I interrupt people. And it's just what it is.
So sometimes like a fire hose when he talks. It's just everywhere.
You're Jersey, right? Like Jersey people seem to do that. I don't mean to be like, I'm like a Georgia Southern guy, so I hate cutting people off, but I think Jersey people are like, you know what? I'm just gonna say it, and I don't care.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, I'm from New York, so it's probably even worse than
Oh, New
Jersey.
York.
So.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah, no, you're all good. Yeah, the Jersey's New York's asshole.
I love it though. I mean, I don't know. Like the Admiral's kind of like that too. He's like, you know what? Let me talk, and you're like, you've been talking for 30 minutes. No, let me talk. Not
Yeah.
you, but the Admiral.
No,
You know what I
I
mean?
hear you. No, that's how it goes sometimes. Like, you know, you get on a tear. That's
Yeah.
a very New Yorker thing to do. Go on a fucking tear.
Yeah.
It's great. I love it. I guess it's
All right,
about
guys.
time to wind down.
Yeah, it's been 3 hours today, so I think it's about time. So, any of you guys got anything cool going on lately, or building anything that you guys, you know what I mean? Projects coming up?
I have some stuff in mind.
I'm just sitting here watching you guys beating my pud, doing nothing.
You know, it's the end of the show when Joe starts letting loose.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
guys,
I
I want to
gotta-
thank the chat. You guys have been totally awesome today, man. Totally great show. Thank you, Jarvis. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate all of you.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Jarvis. Much appreciated.
No, thank you, bro. Thank you, Nathan, for hosting like always, and everybody have a good night.
Right.